The story begins with the beautiful and popular Konohana walking through the school corridor with some friends. She is invited to a tea party in the garden after school and responds excitedly. As she walks, other students admire her, expressing how she is not only beautiful but also smart and kind, often helping her peers with their classwork. A girl comments that Konohana is lovely and a boy joins in, commenting that he can get through the school year just because she helped him. Tomonari Itsuki is working at his part-time job within a construction site. While he is working, his manager comes up to him and tells him he can leave early since it is his last day. He thanks his manager before his fellow workers interrupt, noticing an array of luxurious vehicles driving past the site. They mention that the cars are probably on their way to the famous Kyu Academy to start the new term. Tomonari awkwardly says goodbye to his colleagues before rushing off. Despite his abrupt departure, they smile as he leaves, calling him a hard worker despite being quiet. They whisper their concerns about Tomonari's background, noting that he comes from a poor family and is probably moving on to another job to help them out. He thinks to himself as he walks that, despite leaving his job, he is proud to be attending school tomorrow, with his savings lasting him another year. He is excited to start. Tomonari arrives home and calls out to his parents but is instead met with a strange note reading, "Be well," left on the table. Confused, he scrambles outside and a concerned neighbor comes out, telling him he saw his parents leave in a hurry. Tomonari collapses to the floor, perplexed that their financial situation was so bad that his parents had to flee without him. He goes into a state of panic. With no support circle, he is left with only the 200 yen in his pocket. His family was poor because of their gambling addiction, and they could only survive on the money he earned working part-time. He was worried about what he would do from tomorrow onwards, with no help to cover food and rent costs. Despite the situation, he still goes to school for his first day. On the way, he stresses about his situation, wondering if he can even still go to school. He passes a girl dressed well in a distinct uniform. He realizes that she must be a student from the prestigious Kyu Academy. He looks back at her and sighs, knowing the school was exclusive for upper-class kids with strict entry policies, beautiful architecture, and all the kids having an easy life. The girl finishes her conversation with another student, and Tomonari notices her drop a pass on the floor. He picks it up, running after her. As he is about to tap her shoulder, a van comes seemingly out of nowhere. He hears the driver scream to get in the car, making him confused as to what was going on. Two men in masks come out, grabbing hold of the girl. Tomonari freezes before realizing what is happening. The girl is being kidnapped. He shouts after the men, who look back at him confused. They tell him it is none of his business and ask him if he knows the girl, afraid to leave a witness. Next moment, they grab hold of him and Tomonari scrambles, but it is too late. They slam the door with both of them inside and race away. They are both taken to an abandoned facility and they are put in handcuffs. Despite his panic, Tomonari notices the girl is indifferent, sitting calmly. Tomonari wonders what he did to deserve this nonsense. He puts his hand up to tell the kidnappers that he may not be of much use to them as he comes from a poor family who won't pay them. But they tell him to shut up and that he is just an extra. The kidnappers then discuss the girl, with one mentioning that she comes from the Konohana family, a name that is worth 300 trillion yen and one of the most prominent donor of the Kyu Academy. They laugh, thinking about all the money they get from her. Tomonari listens to the conversation. The girl is from the Kyu Academy? It is then that he notices that she is not only well-dressed with impeccable manners, but she is also physically beautiful, with long legs, silky hair, and large eyes. He wouldn't be surprised if they tried to use the girl for something other than money. The girl finally speaks, asking calmly to go to the toilet. Tomonari is confused by her request. He then thought to himself that the composed lady was still a human with normal functions. The girl then looks at Tomonari and tells him she is desperate, and he is stunned over her words. Does she not understand the danger she is in? The first kidnapper responds angrily, telling her to go before she makes a mess. The girl then asks him if he is sure. Tomonari asks if it is possible for her to hold it back, for his own sake too. The second kidnapper advises that he does not know how long he will need to hold them, and they will get in trouble if they leave a mess, but warns he will not be removing her handcuffs. The girl goes to the bathroom and comes back, telling Tomonari how relieved she feels. He yells that he doesn't need her to tell him that information. He thought to himself how different the girl was from what he thought she would be like. To make matters worse, the girl then asks for some tea, infuriating the kidnapper even more. She wasn't even the slightest bit concerned over the situation. The kidnapper hisses to just give her a bottle of water, but she assertively asks again for some tea. Infuriated, the kidnapper shouts at Tomonari to look after the girl, and he panics, asking why him. He hears water hit the floor and looks at the girl, who has completely drenched herself. She sighs, explaining that she isn't used to drinking from an ordinary bottle. They were confused as to whether the girl was really from the Konohana house, considering her behavior. Tomonari wondered if all high society women behaved like her. especially considering how confident the girl was. Not even fazed by her own kidnapping. Concerned, Tomonari offers to help her, and the girl responds, asking if he will take the bottle away. This annoys Tomonari even more. Why would he take the water from her? He tells her that the water has made a mess on the floor, so she should move. But it was too late. The girl gets up but slips, banging her head. The kidnapper was infuriated. He asked the other kidnapper if it was true that the ladies of the Konohana house are perfect. He looked down at the girl who was weeping on the floor, convinced that she was not a member of such a household. Tomonari is also stunned, convinced that the data can't be wrong, but even his own commoner family was not as messy as the girl. He asks her if she can stand. He brushes her hair to the side and sees a red scratch. He tells her not to touch it as it could get infected. The girl is now obviously upset with a tear falling from one eye. She asks him why he is here. He explains that he saw that she dropped her student ID, so he was implied trying to return it. And then the kidnappers showed up. He passes her ID to her. She pulls a device out of her pocket and starts typing. Tomonari asks what she is doing, and she explains that a rescue party should be on their way soon. She then tells him she wants to sleep, and Tomonari asks how it's even possible for her to want to sleep in the middle of this mess. She looks up to him and asks for a pillow, shocking him even more. He was stunned to think that such a distinguished girl can openly act so spoiled. He gives in to her, thinking that the kidnappers instructed him to entertain her after all. He offers for the girl to sleep in his lap, and she smiles, telling him that his legs are the perfect height for her head. She closes her eyes and asks him to sing her a lullaby. He declines, telling her that it is not in his repertoire. She then asks if he could tell her a story instead. He asks if anything is capable of stopping the girl. Tomonari looks over to the kidnappers, who are deep in discussion from afar. He notices that the girl was fast asleep, and he wonders how she managed to switch off in the middle of all the chaos. Any normal girl would be freaking out in this situation, whilst the girl in his lap was lay asleep and drooling, blissfully unbothered. Tomonari thought that the girl may have appeared ignorant, but at least she takes away some of the darkness from the situation. And because of that, Tomonari was able to remain calm too. He grabs hold of the handcuff and the chain moves, causing a large barrel to knock over and make a bang. The kidnapper snapped on the phone to someone. He insisted that he would harm the girl if there are any more delays. By that point in time, the girl had woken up and they listened to the conversation, which ended with the kidnapper warning the individual to not provoke him. Tomonari turns to the girl, reassuring her that he will protect her if anyone tries to harm her. The girl turns to him, asking him why he would do that. Tomonari pauses for a moment. Ultimately, he did not have much to his name at the moment. Helping someone was the least he could do, even if it was nothing but for his own satisfaction. He was grateful for the girl because of that. The girl looks back to him and tells him he is a good guy, and that it feels really nice having him around. She randomly changes the conversation to the smell of his laundry. That resembles a freshly hung futon. Tomonari was confused. He guessed that meant the girl likes the smell of dead ticks. The girl went on to tell him that she has a lot of servants, but most of them are really uptight around her, and that Tomonari was different as he was so casual. She liked that, as it meant that she could be casual around him too, which made her happy. Tomonari's eyes widened at her words, but she continues to ask his name. He introduces himself to the girl as Tomonari Itsuki, and the girl then introduces herself as Konohana Hinako. She reaches to hold onto his face and tells him that he is hers, starting from today. Suddenly, there is a loud crash and they hear a voice shout all personnel. The facility is raided and the kidnappers freeze. A gas is released, making nothing visible. The police secure the two kidnappers, who scramble. A figure of a maid is revealed through the gas, who warns them not to fight back. The police call back that they have secured 3 suspects, and Tomonari stutters that he is actually a victim too. The maid named Shizune responds, confused, emphasizing that there should only be 2 criminals. Tomonari is stunned to see a maid in charge of the operation. The maid dashes over to Konohana, asking her if she is all right. She apologizes for the delay, but scolds the girl for not letting her know she was going outside in the first place. The girl is still nonchalant, arguing that it is too much trouble for her, but the maid argues back that incidents like this happen when the girl does not communicate. The girl spots Tomonari restrained and tells them that he is not a criminal. Tomonari is released, and he is annoyed that he has been attacked and restrained once again. The maid apologized, insisting that there had been a mistake, and they thought he was one of the criminals too. Tomonari tells them that he was in handcuffs with the girl, so there is no way that he was in on this anyway. The maid suggests that they should leave and advises Tomonari to join them. Konohana tugs onto Shizune, telling her that she wants him, gesturing to Tomonari. Shizune replies that she will take care of it. Tomonari listens into the conversation, stunned that he was being spoken about like that. What did they mean by take care? The car arrives and Tomonari and Konohana sit in the back. Konohana closes her eyes, asking him to wake her when they arrive. She rests her head on his shoulders and drifts off. Tomonari sighs good grief and secures his seatbelt. From the opposite side of the car, Shizune observes him and comments that she is not surprised that the lady wants him. Tomonari looks up, confused as to what she means. He then asks where they are taking him after all, and Shizune responds that he will soon find out. She taps away on her phone, telling him that they are almost done checking his background. And then the maid lists the most intimate details about Tomonari, that he was 16 years old and in high school, with no siblings and living with his parents, who are so poor that he needs to pay his own tuition fee with his own money. She affirms that last night the boy's parents ran away from home, abandoning him and taking all the money. Tomonari is stunned, asking the maid how she knows all of this information. She tells him that she was able to find out via the Konohana information network. Tomonari sweats, knowing all his sense of privacy has just been thrown out of the window. The maid adds that she is aware that Tomonari is about to start school tomorrow, but she tells him that he will not be able to attend any longer. Tomonari's eyes widen in distress and confusion as the maid continues. She tells him that he still hasn't paid the tuition fee, and his parents have run away with Tomonari's cash that he saved up for school, and that they were planning to run away for a while now. Tomonari is stunned. He had low expectations of his parents but did not expect them to be this heartless. The maid adds to his anxiety, commenting that he still needs to think about all the bills he will need to cover by himself. The maid then tells him that she has a suggestion for him, and a hopeless Tomonari turns to face her. He is so desperate that he will consider anything. The maid then proposes for Tomonari to work for Konohana. Still reeling from the proposal, Tomonari hesitates, uncertainty etched across his face. The maid notices his hesitation and asks if he knows anything at all about Konohana's family. She then reveals that he must, as his bank account is in a Konohana group bank. Tomonari pleads for her to stop leaking his private information. The maid then reveals something that takes him by surprise. The girl resting in his arms is the daughter of the president of the Konohana group and heir to a 300 trillion yen fortune. As Konohana sleeps, the maid continues to explain that she herself is one of the maids that serves Konohana, and her offer would be for Tomonari to work the same job as her, to tend to the country's most powerful lady. Tomonari freaks out, asking if she wants him to be a maid too. She reassures him that she was thinking more like a butler, and after all, he will probably be considered more like a caretaker to the lady. She explains that it is a special job and usually requires proper training, but she would be happy to make an expectation to Tomonari, as it's become apparent over the past day that the girl has taken a special liking to him. Tomonari looks over to Konohana, who is still resting on his shoulder. She stirs in her sleep, making him red. She clings onto him tighter and she mumbles how sweet he smells. Shizune notices and warns Tomonari that if he takes a liking to Konohana, she will chop off his pickle. Tomonari believes that he has misheard her threat and stutters, but Shizune changes the topic that they will discuss the specifics with her boss. The three of them arrive at the Konohana estate and Tomonari is immediately enchanted by the stunning grounds. He is greeted by a team of butlers and servants who warmly welcome Konohana home. The mansion is massive, with a grand entrance and sparkling chandelier. Tomonari's home felt like a doghouse compared to this. Shizune questioned his dramatic reaction to the household, and he explains that he basically comes from a different planet. The beauty of the estate gave him goosebumps. The maid scolds Tomonari gently, advising him to adjust to the grandeur of his surroundings. As if he starts to work for the lady, then this will be his usual workplace. Tomonari responds that he still hasn't decided if he even wants to go through with the employment offer, despite the fact that he had still lost all confidence in himself. Shizune turns to Konohana regarding her plans for the rest of her day. Konohana told the maid that her only plans are to sleep, and Shizune responds that she will show Tomonari around and arrange for someone else to assist her. Konohana then looks over to the maid and tells her that she actually doesn't want to sleep anymore. Shizune asks her again if she really doesn't want to take a nap. The lady expresses a desire to stay with Tomonari, showing even more attachment to him. The servants are shocked at the fact that Konohana was postponing her nap for Tomonari. Tomonari thinks to himself, ultimately Konohana had been sleeping throughout the whole trip. Shizune instructs Konohana and Tomonari to follow her, and as they approach the stairs, Konohana tugs on Tomonari's hand, ensuring he stays close. He guides her up the stairs and Konohana asks him if he would like her other hand. He politely declines. At the top of the stairs, they come to a door where the maid pauses before knocking. The door creaks open to reveal a large office where a man sits at the head of a grand table. His eyes meet Tomonari's and he asks if he is Izuki-kun. The man introduces himself as Konohana Kagen, the president of the Konohana group. Despite the initial tension, Kagen bursts out laughing, putting Tomonari at ease. Shizune shakes her head, explaining that the president likes to play around. He explains that despite his position as the head of a multi-trillion yen company, he is surprisingly laid back. He told Tomonari that he heard that the boy was also involved in his daughter's kidnapping attempt. and asks him if anything happened at this time. He then tells Tomonari that he can see that his daughter has taken a liking to him, and he has never seen her so attached. Tomonari explains that he has not done anything in particular for Konohana to act this way. Kagen goes on to explain that he is relieved his daughter has found someone she can connect with, as Hinako has always wanted a caretaker who would treat her like a friend, other than someone who fears her power. Ultimately, because of his responsibility, the president was unable to find someone like that for her. And now there was no way that his daughter would be willing to let go of him. Noticing Tomonari's overwhelmed expression, Kagen suggests that he should hear a little more about his daughter before committing to the job. Tomonari tells Shizune to come over, snapping his fingers. Shizune switches on a TV to show him a film. She begins by explaining how Konohana is within her school, the Q Academy. The academy was beautiful with state-of-the-art facilities. Students gathered around Konohana, who was loved by her peers, and she was constantly leading by example, answering all the questions in class. She finished her schoolwork quickly and perfectly. Students gather around her after class, asking if she can join them at tea parties, to which Konohana responds pleasantly that she would love to. Watching the film, Tomonari is shocked by the girl in front of him. He thought to himself that the girl on screen was a load of rubbish. The way she acts in front of others is so different as to how she acts in private. Kagen then went on to show Tomonari how his daughter acts outside of the public eye. The film showed a previous caretaker begging Konohana to start making a move as the girl takes a nap on her school desk. The caretaker pleads with her to get dressed and go to her gym class. The scene then cuts to the caretaker asking Konohana about an unauthorized use of her credit card, and Konohana flippantly remarks that she probably dropped it a few months ago. The caretaker cries, asking why the girl didn't tell her earlier. Kagen comments that this is Hinako in her natural state, and the caretaker was Konohana's last one. The girl needed to quit after suffering from gastrointestinal perforation due to stress. So ultimately, Konohana was a lady to the public, but other than that, she is only interested in indulging in hedonism. Kagen went on to tell Tomonari that his daughter is constantly switching, so needs someone who can manage both of her states well. Overwhelmed by the information, Tomonari only had one thing on his mind: money, and he explains to Kagen that he is penniless, hoping that he does not appear rude or desperate. He turns to Kagen, Konohana still clinging to his side, and asks if he will be paid for the commitment. The next chapter begins with Kagen offering Tomonari a salary of 20,000 yen for the simple task of taking care of his daughter. Kagen went on to promote the job offer, telling Tomonari that he will also get to live in the estate and will receive 3 meals a day at no expense. Tomonari is stunned by the proposal. The amount of money Kagen is offering far exceeds anything Tomonari has earned in previous jobs. Kagen asked him if his lower was too small, and went on to offer 50,000 instead, shocking Tomonari even more. Kagen asked what he needed to do in order for Tomonari to accept, and the boy stuttered that he would usually be okay with accepting 8,000. However, Kagen ends the conversation on a serious note. He makes it clear that he holds high expectations, and the responsibilities of the job are more than what Tomonari may be imagining. The president sat calmly at his desk, and asked Tomonari if he knows why Hinako needs to upkeep her perfect lady image. He went on to say that it was that way in order for her to find the ultimate husband. With the Konohana group performing poorly, Kagen mentioned how he could not ignore his problems any longer. The president goes on to explain that ever since his daughter was a little girl, she has been maintaining a perfect image in both school events and parties. However, Kagen continued that one thing he could not change is her real personality. He told Tomonari that as a caretaker, his responsibility is to preserve Hinako's act to appear as the perfect lady, and to also do everything to stop his daughter's true ways to come out. The president finished his speech by telling Tomonari that he needs to realize that the whole point of this is to protect the Hika family's brand and name. Kagen finished by asking Tomonari once again what salary he wanted. The door slams. It turns out that Tomonari and Kagen decided on a 20k salary in the end. The story flashes forward to Tomonari sitting on the end of his bed in his new room. In the end, Kagen warned Tomonari that he was expecting him to work as hard as his pay, and Tomonari breathed out, remembering how the president seemed to be questioning him already. Konohana remained next to Tomonari the whole time, clinging onto his arm. Tomonari was taken aback by her clinginess and told her she was way too close to him. He notices that she also won't stop drooling over him. Kagen told Tomonari that if he ever lays a hand on his daughter, but before he could finish, Tomonari imagined the worst, asking the president if he was going to fire him already. Kagen laughed at the suggestion, reassuring that he would never fire his new hire. Instead, the president went all serious and darkly told Tomonari that if he ever puts his hands on his daughter, he would flat out unalive him instead. Remembering the discussion, Tomonari cringes. He found the whole interaction to be scary with Kagen, And ultimately Tomonari didn't even think about the whole setup to surrounded by family pride and Konohana being the perfect bride. He wanders over to his window admiring the view. It was a completely different world to what Tomonari was used to. The maid enters his room and walks up behind him, kindly congratulating him on his employment. She tells him that she is happy that he accepted the offer and will be hoping to continue to work with him in the future. Tomonari thanks the maid for her kind words, and she realizes that she hasn't even introduced herself yet. She tells him that her name is Tsurumi Shizune, and she works as Konohana's maid. She was planning to guide Tomonari on his duties as her new caretaker, so she suggested that they should make acquaintances. She hands Tomonari a pile of folded clothes and instructs him to get changed. Once he is dressed, Tomonari realizes that the clothes are actually a uniform for the Kyu Academy. Shizune asks if they fit him well, but he asks her if he is really going to the school. Shizune explained that he will have to join Konohana's school as part of the job. Tomonari expressed his concerns to the maid. Of course, the Kyu Academy is a really famous school filled with high net worth students. He couldn't believe anyone wanting to befriend a commoner like him. He thinks about all the things he doesn't know, like etiquette and manners, not to mention the curriculum. Shizune asks him if he is nervous, and he agrees. She leans into Tomonari to adjust his tie, a grin on her face. She tells him that she will hand him his resume and it is important for him to always mind his appearance. Shizune explained that the school rules mean that no servant can enter the grounds, so from now on Tomonari would be considered as an affiliate of the Konohana group. She explained that the next plan is to then make Tomonari a businessman, but Tomonari is just a normal boy who has only lived commoner ways. Tomonari sweats at the proposal, knowing that successors are never just ordinary people like him. Shizune lets him know that he will not be considered a successor of the main branch, but instead a subsidiary of the group. She told him that his family should be considered as part of the Konohana group. Shizune mentioned how she should be servile to Itsuki. That way no one will question him or his background. Tomonari thought about the plan. He knew that he needed to comply with all of this as part of his new job. Shizune passes him a huge book and introduces it as his caretaker manual. She explained that she wants to trust him with the job, but if anything doesn't make sense, then he can use the manual or speak to her. She also warns him that all of the students in the Kyu Academy are taking high-level classes, so it may be hard for him to keep up at first. So to help with that, she advises Tomonari that he will be taking supplementary lessons at dinner time to cover all material he has learned. On top of that, Tomonari also needs to be at Konohana's side at all times. Tomonari is once again stressed. He was already working hard at school in order to go to college in the future, but this was a huge step up. And to make matters worse, the lecture wasn't even over. Shizune told Tomonari he will also need to take classes in manners and etiquette as well as self-defense classes. Tomonari is shocked by the suggestion that he will be learning self-defense, making Shizune question if he was afraid. Tomonari thought that he was being tested by the maid, so he responds confidently that he has worked far more demanding jobs and is sure he will be able to keep up. He knew that he needed to advocate for himself if he was going to work here. Shizune accepted his response and advised him that once he finishes learning the basics, she hopes to expect only good things to come from him. And next minute, Tomonari was completely floored by the maid. He howls out in pain as he is defeated in their first self-defense lesson. Begging the maid to forgive him, he insists on her just letting him die. Shizune wraps up the class, telling Tomonari he did a good job. Although Tomonari knew that she treated him as if she was twisting a baby's hands. Who would have thought that the maid was so good at fighting? Tomonari dashes straight to his room and collapses on his bed. He had an awful day and was not certain he could take another at the household. Moving across his bed, he notices a small lump under the sheets. He lifts them up to reveal a sleeping Konohana in his bed. He calls out her name in shock, asking why she is there. But then his mind flashes back to Shizune, who warns him to watch his tone when he is at work. He dashes out of bed, formally asking Hinako why she is there. With her eyes still closed, she responds that it is her bed. Tomonari genuinely did not know what to do at that moment before he remembered the caretaker manual that Shizune passed to him. He flicks to a chapter which covered what to do when Konohana sleeps, and it cited that if he were to wake her midway through her sleep, she would go into a bad mood. Tomonari takes the advice and steps away from the sleeping girl, wondering what to do. His phone pings from his pocket and a message from Yuri appears, who tells Tomonari that if he is ignoring her, she can hang out with her other friends. Tomonari realizes that he has forgotten to tell his friend about everything that has happened. He types a message that something has happened so he can't go to his old school anymore. His phone flashes alive with his friend calling, frantically messaging to ask what happened. And then Konohana wakes up and sits up greeting Tomonari. Tomonari jumps, not realizing she was awake. She asked him who was calling him. Tomonari explains that it was just a childhood friend from his old school. Konohana takes his phone from his hands, telling Tomonari that she has confiscated his phone. Her excuse was to maintain the peace. Tomonari questions her and politely asks for his phone back, but Konohana hides under the covers, refusing to return it. Konohana tells him that she hates his formal tone and asks him to make it normal again. Confused as to why she cared so much, Tomonari told her that Shizune was the one who recommended for him to change it, but Konohana would not take no for an answer and told him again to change it or she keeps his phone. Tomonari lightens his voice up, asking if she is happy now. She agreed, but he was confused as to why she was being so picky. Konohana calls his name and he asks her what's up, but she simply tells him that they should have a good day tomorrow. Tomonari agrees with her. Konohana relaxes into the bed and closes her eyes, and Tomonari tries to catch her before she drifts off once again inside his bed. But it was too late, the lady was fast asleep. The next morning at the Konohana estate, Shizune asks Itsuki to come with her to the car. She asks him which seat he should choose. Remembering his training, he tells her that he will sit at the rear on the right side. Shizune tells him he is correct, and that the seating arrangement goes from the rear left, center right, and the person with the lowest position will sit at the right of the chauffeur. Tomonari adds that if the one driving is a companion, the person with the highest position sits in front instead. Shizune applauds him for his knowledge. Shizune turns to Konohana, telling her it is time for them to leave while all of her servants line up to wish her a good day. The car speeds off, and inside, Konohana is already complaining that she is tired. She suggests going home already. Shizune, sitting in the front, answers her and tells her she will only accept that request after 8 hours. She turns to Tomonari and tells him that she will drop him off somewhere close to the school gates, so it doesn't look suspicious, considering both Konohana and Tomonari should look like they came from 2 different houses. Tomonari asks if it will just be him and Konohana today. Shizune tells him that although it will be the 2 of them alone, there will always be backup who are close by to assist. Shizune tells him that the incident that happened the other day only slipped through because Konohana left without telling anyone. She tells Tomonari that he must do everything to prevent something similar from happening in the future. Tomonari agrees. Konohana notices his tone again and turns to look at him. Sitting next to him, she asks what is with the way he is speaking. Konohana then turns to Shizune and asks her to tell Itsuki to speak like normal. Shizune argues that such a request would set a bad example. Konohana accepts it, but asks to allow it as long as it's just her and Tomonari. Shizune accepts. Konohana turns back to Tomonari, telling him how nice it will be that he can relax his tone around her now. Tomonari is not impressed by the alteration, but what could he do? Shizune asks Tomonari to still be considerate of the way he speaks when he is within Kyu Academy, as it will stop him from standing out more than he already naturally will as a common-born. Tomonari tells the maid that he understands. A few moments pass and they are already close to school. Konohana calls Itsuki's name and he asks what is wrong now, in a polite way of course. She asks if he can carry her, and of course he tells her that such a request is beyond limits. Konohana turns to Shizune and tells her how nice Itsuki smells. Shizune curiously looks over. She asks him if it would be possible for her to have a smell for future reference, and Tomonari gets embarrassed by the request, humbly refusing. The car arrives at the school gates and Tomonari gets out. The first thing he notices is how empty the grounds are. However, he remembers that Konohana's bodyguards must be watching over them from somewhere. Shizune calls his name and hands him a black package. She tells him to make use of it if Konohana becomes unreasonable. He takes it with confusion, and Shizune bows down to him before leaving them to it. She asks them both to take care. As they walk, Konohana is already complaining that she wants to go home. Tomonari turns to her with a concerned look, asking her if she needs to keep her act up as they are in public. The girl tells him that she can relax as no one is around. Tomonari notices that Konohana has some sort of detection to know when people are around, but he is super aware that he still has a big responsibility today to protect Konohana's image. And then, Tomonari sees Kyu Academy for the first time. As Japan's most prestigious school, he is blown away by the scale of the building. He thinks the name of the school is stupid, but he knows how great of a school it is. And then he hears students. The first thing he hears is Konohana's name being called. Students gather around the girl, wishing her a good morning. She wishes them a good morning too, charmingly. Tomonari then hears a bunch of compliments coming from fellow students, including how beautiful and elegant Konohana is. He is taken aback by the students' reaction to Konohana, but he is even more shocked by how quickly the girl's posture and demeanor changed. No way was that the same girl who was drooling in her sleep yesterday. Konohana turns to him, asking him if he is okay. He shakily tells her he is fine, and she suggests that they leave the growing crowd of students. In class, Tomonari meets his new teacher, who introduces herself. She tells him that she was expecting him and will be in charge of his classes. The teacher asks Tomonari if he is acquainted with Konohana, and he stutters as he tries to come up with a good response. But Konohana beats him to it, telling the teacher that her family and Tomonari's family are on good terms, and because of that, she is accompanying him today. The teacher tells Tomonari how lucky he is to have Konohana as a guide. Tomonari smiles and agrees with the teacher, who then asks if she can have a turn next time. Tomonari laughs to himself, knowing Konohana would really be lost in the school if she were ever left to herself. The teacher introduces Tomonari to his new class, and he tells the other students that he is pleased to meet them all. He instantly notices how no one clapped or bowed, but instead, all of the students were quiet and mature, with welcoming expressions. The teacher instructs Tomonari to sit at a desk and the class begins. It is mathematics. The teacher explains that they will be learning about integration by substitution today, which instantly panics Tomonari. He thinks that this is a topic they would learn closer to the end of third year, rather than in his current grade. Eventually, the class ends, and Tomonari is stressed over how difficult the class was, although he was able to keep up thanks to Shizuni's assistance. At the end of the first period, Tomonari peeks over at Konohana, wondering how her day is going. A fellow student approaches her desk and asks if she can speak to her about what they have just learned. Konohana kindly accepts. Tomonari realizes that she is doing just fine, and then he hears someone call him. He turns around to see a guy who instantly starts to give Tomonari a hard time. The boy asks him why he did not say hello to him when he first started before harassing Tomonari, asking him to hand over his tributes. And then the boy suddenly gets slapped across the head by a girl who scolds him for scaring Tomonari. The boy is embarrassed and tells her it was just a joke before clearing off. The girl introduces herself as Asahi Karen, and she is accompanied by another guy who introduces himself as Taisho Katsuya. Taisho tells Tomonari that he noticed how desperate he was to keep up with the rest of the class, making Tomonari nervously ask Taisho if he was watching him. Taisho laughs and advises him not to worry too much, as all transfer students basically go through the same thing. Asahi turns to Tomonari, asking him if he has lived a commoner life. She then goes on to say that she has never heard of the name Tomonari, further questioning what his family does. Tomonari explains that he is in the IT business, although his family does not have a particularly big name. Taisho tells Karen that he knew it. Asahi explains that all new students are set into two groups. Firstly, those with great academic abilities who transfer or alternatively admitted due to family circumstances. Most of the students in the former are from wealthy families, while the latter are mainly commoners. They explain that this is why students from similar backgrounds often hang out together in order to support each other. The Kyu Academy's curriculum is quite hard after all, especially if you transfer from a more normal school. The pair tells Tomonari that they are also commoner-born, so he should stick with them. Tomonari freezes up at their proposal, but he remembers his responsibilities. For 20,000 yen and 3 meals with accommodation, he is not about to drop his part. He smiles, telling them that he would love to accept their help. But Taisho mentions there is something he wants to ask first. Tomonari smiles and says, "Sure," and Taisho goes on to ask what Tomonari's relation to Konohana is. He mentions how he noticed they both arrived at school together, and Tomonari mentions the same script he has been using with everyone else in the school, that their parents are acquaintances, and Konohana was simply showing him around the academy. Taisho questions if that really is all there is to their relationship, asking if they are fiancés. Tomonari is stunned at Taisho's theory and declines it straight away. Taisho starts laughing and mentions how it was a really tense moment. Tomonari asks him why he asked anyway, and then Karen brings in some more insight on the politics of Kyu Academy. She explains that Konohana is very famous within the school but somehow has not faced any allegations surrounding a boyfriend. That is why people think that she has a fiancé already. And then when Tomonari arrived at school with her, everyone thought that maybe he was the lucky guy. Tomonari doesn't think that Konohana has a fiancé, especially since her dad is still in the process of finding a family for his daughter to marry into. However, the theory could still maybe be possible. But for him, he is completely single, and he jokes to Asahi and Taisho that they can feel free to introduce him to someone. Taisho laughs at his joke, telling Tomonari he can see what he can do. Tomonari is happy with how his day is going, especially since he was worried about starting at the school at first. He walks outside to see the old student council building, a pretty facility located at the back of the school. Tomonari heard that the building used to be the student council office, but it is not used anymore as it is old. He walks into the building and up the stairs, hearing a slam. He remembered that his new friends asked him for lunch, but he made the excuse that he needed to speak to his family during that time and that he also brought a packed lunch. They brought up how Konohana also brings a packed lunch, and that there are rumors that she is actually helping with the business and participating in video meetings during lunch. Tomonari thought that is what he expected of the girl. He walks outside to the roof, and there is Konohana on the ground, clutching her lunch bag. Tomonari wishes her a good day, and she scolds him, telling him yet again to drop the formal tone. Tomonari acted none the wiser to Konohana's request, and she told him to stop playing dumb. She picks up her food with her chopstick and Tomonari lets her know that she isn't holding it properly. He offered to help her, realizing that this is the reason why she needs a caretaker. He also remembered how she couldn't even drink from a normal water bottle. The girl opened her mouth and Tomonari fed her. She smiled as she enjoyed the moment. Tomonari asked why she didn't take her lunch in the cafeteria with the other students, and Konohana told him the reason why she takes her lunch here is because she doesn't like all the attention and people gathering around her. Her usual spot was always empty. She also explained that she has a bento box because it lets her pick out what she likes. Tomonari asked her curiously if there are any foods that she doesn't like. The girl went on to list a variety of vegetables and other healthy options. Tomonari was amused by her pickiness, that there are a lot of foods that Konohana doesn't like, realizing that it was mainly vegetables. Konohana laughed, telling him that he had found out her secret. Tomonari thought how surprised Asahi and Taisho would be if they knew this information about Konohana. The girl changes the subject and asks how her caretaker is finding his first day at the academy. Tomonari knew that he was lucky to be at this school, but he could not fake that he was finding it difficult to keep up with the challenging curriculum. He told Konohana that he has not had the best day. Konohana gave him the heads up that he should try his best in class. As if he were to get bad marks, it would put his caretaker position into jeopardy. She then asked him if he wanted to eat some food, revealing a selection of delicious options in her lunchbox. Tomonari was tempted by the offer, but wondered if it was really acceptable for him to eat some of Konohana's food. He picked some up and ate it, surprised by how great it tasted. Konohana asked him which option he liked the most, and he told her that the egg roll would have to be his favorite. She then passes him something else, another egg roll. She picks it up with her chopsticks and instructs Tomonari to open his mouth. Tomonari started blushing like crazy, which was embarrassing because Konohana appeared super cool and relaxed about feeding him. He munches the food and Konohana asks him if it is good. He agrees, but asks her if it is definitely okay that she is sharing her food with him. Konohana sternly tells him that she is his master, so she needs to make sure that he is fed and happy. Tomonari then decided to ask about her previous caretakers and the reason why they quit. Konohana tells him that HSA has no idea, but her last one stayed for 2 weeks. The one before that stayed for 3 weeks. She goes on to say that the longest she has had a caretaker would be for around a month only. Tomonari was confused by this. Why would anyone quit a job that offers so many benefits? Konohana didn't seem to understand his argument, so he went on to tell her that he gets paid a lot, plus 3 meals a day. Of course, the job wasn't easy, but it did not even compare to the previous jobs he has worked. Not to mention the fact he can stay in education whilst working. Konohana listened to him, then asked him what about her. Tomonari looked at her in confusion, and Konohana asked him again about her. She then extended her question to ask if Tomonari would ever be interested in marrying into a rich family. He was shocked by her question. The answer was obvious. Even if theoretically speaking he was interested, like anyone would take him seriously as an in-law. Konohana noticed his hesitance and asked him to promise that he won't quit. She looked exhausted at this point, and Tomonari was sure that she was about to fall asleep once again. He offered to get her a pillow, but the girl started crawling close and closer to him. She eventually curled up by his side, her head resting in his lap. She tells him how comfortable she is. Tomonari thanks her for the compliment. As Konohana slept, Tomonari thought to himself. The opportunity was of course exciting, but he could not cover up the fact that something did not feel right. Although he is caretaker by job title, in reality there was a lot more to his and Konohana's relationship. Although it was a bit weird, it didn't at all feel that bad. Tomonari's phone buzzed in his pocket. He picked it up and it was Shizune. He greeted her hello, but Shizune was not impressed. She told him he picked up the phone too late and next time he should ensure he picks up the phone by the 5th ring. She went on to say that the rule was quite tolerant since he is in school after all, but she will make it a habit to keep checking in until he is more used to his position as a caretaker. Shizune asked Tomonari if Konohana was with him, and he told her that she was currently sleeping. Shizune asked him if there was anything at all that was on his mind, and he eventually told her that he was worried about how high level the academy was. Shizune understood his concern and offered to put in some more extra classes so he can get more help, and Tomonari instantly regretted bringing it up. He changed the subject to ask about Konohana's previous caretakers, and why they left after only a few weeks. Shizune explained that all of Konohana's caretakers previously worked for Kagen, and they were used to seeing themselves as subordinates of the family. Because of that, the caretakers acted like Konohana's servants, which she did not like at all. Tomonari questioned if Konohana does not like servants, but Shizune corrected him, telling him that she just did not like the formal atmosphere they created. She explained that by hiring Tomonari, it would be the first time that the family has taken in a commoner as Konohana's caretaker. In fact, hiring Tomonari was considered as more of an experiment. Not knowing how to feel about that comment, Tomonari responded bluntly, but he knew that everything Shizune told him made sense. They did manage to sort out his onboarding pretty fast. Shizune asked him if he had become close with anyone at the school. Tomonari responds that he is getting along really well with Asahi Karen and Taishu Katsuya. Shizune instantly recognized the names, informing Tomonari that Asahi comes from a family who own a trading company called Jai's Holdings. Tomonari was shocked to hear this. Why did she say that she is from a commoner background? He then realized how big this company was, with him always seeing their adverts on TV, and he has even bought a few of their products himself. Shizune went on to say that it was a large company with their revenue being amongst the top 5 electric appliance retailers in the country. Tomonari was stunned. What part of her family are commoners then? Shizune then told him that his friend Taishu comes from a family who own a famous moving company, so it turns out that he is also from a pretty wealthy and famous background. Shizune ends the conversation by asking Tomonari to report back to her if he makes any more connections, and of course if he finds any trouble. He agrees, although he can't help feeling betrayed. He looks down to see Konohana, who is now awake. She asks him what is wrong. He realized that she must have been awake this whole time and told her that it was nothing much. His confidence had just taken a bit of a blow. He knew it could be a possibility that his friends could find out about his commoner background, which could cause trouble for Konohana's family. All of them were wealthy, and he felt more alienated than ever. He turned to Konohana, asking her why she chose him as her caretaker. She pauses before answering. The reason why she chose Tomonari was because she thought he was an honest person. He was taken aback by this response, and she went into more detail. She told him that she noticed that he took care of her simply because he wanted to, and that was something she liked about him. Tomonari was shocked by her sweet comments and was wondering if she was still half asleep. The bell rang, signaling that lunchtime was over. Konohana pushes her luck, mentioning how she wants to skip the afternoon class. Tomonari obviously tells her she can't. In the next scene, Konohana returns to class. She is selected by the teacher to answer a question after Taishu was unsure of the answer. She walks up to the board and answers the question perfectly. Her teacher nods his head in approval. Tomonari is also in the class and is impressed by Konohana's abilities. He can't believe that this is the girl who was messing around and trying to get out of school just a few moments ago. Asahi laughs at Taishu for not being able to answer, but Taishu is relaxed about academic abilities. The bell rings and the students discuss the class. Tomonari spots Konohana walking with a group of girls and he gets up, seeing it as a chance to go to the restroom. He thinks to himself that he still needs to stay on top of his prep. He notices Hinako also walking towards the bathroom before his phone buzzes in his pocket. A voice asks him if he is free right now. He agrees. The voice explains that Konohana has dropped her wallet, which is equipped with a tracking device. The device shows that the wallet is located somewhere on the west side of the building but cannot be pinpointed exactly. Tomonari asks if they have any idea at all. The voice responds that it is in the restroom. The voice, which turns out to be Shizune, mentions that Konohana must have dropped it in the restroom. She asks Tomonari to collect it, and he instantly panics at the request. He tells Shizune that she can't just make a guy go into the girls' bathroom. What would the other students think if he were caught? He approaches the ladies' bathroom, attracting a crowd of curious onlookers, and a voice asks him if he is all right. He turns around to see a girl with masses of blonde hair. She tells him she must introduce herself, and she goes on to say that her name is Tenuji Mirei, the only daughter of the head of the Tenuji group. Her words mean nothing to Tomonari, who stands there ignorantly. This seems to anger the girl, who asks if he really doesn't know who she is. She tells him there is no way that he does not know anything about the Tenuji group and that he is far from being ignorant. She explains that her family bears the title of Japan's greatest manufacturers and chemical producers, not to mention that the group manages all of the mining of iron. She finishes her lecture by asserting that she is on the same level as the Konohana group. Tomonari sweats, telling her he understands. The girl asks him if he knows of the Konohana group, and of course Tomonari agrees, but he really can't be bothered with the random girl's lecture. His words only infuriate her more. She tells him that her name is basically unknown in the school because of Konohana's popularity. She finally calms down, asking him again what the issue is. Tomonari explains that someone dropped their wallet in the girl's bathroom, and Tenuji tells him she can go in and get it. She comes back with the pink wallet and hands it over. Tomonari thanks her, but that doesn't stop the girls prying. Tenuji asks him how he was aware that a girl had dropped her wallet, and he has to quickly come up with an excuse. He doesn't think it is a good idea to mention Hinako's name, as it's clear that the girl hates her. Instead, he tells Tenuji that the owner of the wallet told him to look for it, and he figured out for himself that it must have been left in the bathroom. The girl raises her eyebrow and asks him if he is a Goffner. She advises that if he lets people take advantage of him, he will only put himself in a bad position and lose his battles ahead. She tells him that everyone in this academy has a bright future. Tomonari stutters nervously, telling the girl that he will be more careful next time. The girl tells him that he has no confidence in his speech, and that he should be clearer. He repeats himself, more assertively this time, saying that he will be careful. The girl gives him a grin of approval. She continues to say that he should fix his posture, that his confidence is completely dependent on his posture. She begins to walk away, letting him know that if he has any more issues in the future, he should look for her golden hair. Tomonari hesitates before asking if it is against the school rules to dye your hair. The girl whips around and asks him if he really thinks her blonde hair is unnatural and if it is wrong for her to dye it. She dashes off, with the final word that she did not dye her hair. But Tomonari knew that she was definitely caught in a lie. At the end of class, all of the students say goodbye to one another. Tomonari is tapped on the shoulder, and Taisho tells him he worked well today. Asahi makes the suggestion to have a first-day party. Tomonari apologizes and explains that he needs to go home as soon as he finishes. Asahi agrees and says that they should plan something next time they are all free. His two friends wave him goodbye and leave the classroom, leaving Tomonari waiting for Konohana, who is personally greeted farewell by each student. She leaves the classroom, and Tomonari notices her walking towards the school shop, picking something up. She then leaves the building, walking past a row of bushes near the old building. Tomonari chases after her, curious about what she is getting up to. Behind the bushes is a pond filled with a school of fish. Konohana is crouched down near the pond, and Tomonari asks her what she is doing there. She tells him she is feeding the fish as she drops some fish food into the water. The fish swim to the surface to eat, and she tells her caretaker that it is something she enjoys doing, how the fish eat just by opening their mouths. Tomonari finds it cute how Konohana loves animals. He discusses how he believes that the fish may appear happy, but they also have pains that humans don't understand. He suggests that they should leave as Shizune was waiting for them both. Konohana refuses. She explains that she likes it there because it is more free since there aren't many students around after school. Tomonari brings up that she can fully relax once she is home, but Konohana explains that she still has extra lessons that evening. Tomonari suggests that they can't stay in school forever and tries to motivate her to get up. He tells her that if she continues to be lazy, she will only suffer more. But Konohana is visibly exhausted. Tomonari remembers the packet that Shizune passed to him and her advice to use it if Konohana became difficult. He opens it up to reveal a packet of chips. Konohana sees them and gets really excited, but Tomonari holds them above her reach, bribing her that she can have the chips if she agrees to go home. Konohana admits she can't resist the temptation, and Tomonari is shocked by her crazy reaction over a snack. On the way to the car, Konohana munches on the chips happily. Tomonari opens the door for her and apologizes to Shizune for the delay. Shizune is not mad and instead congratulates him on a successful first day. Tomonari explains that he and Konohana meet at the car so nobody will notice that they are traveling together. He looks over at Konohana, who is spilling her chips everywhere. She argues that spilling crumbs is the only correct way to eat chips. Shizune notices the discussion and lets Tomonari know that chips are the lady's favorite food, but she can't eat them that often, so bribing her with them always works. Tomonari asks why she can't eat them often, and Shizune argues that they are not the healthiest or most fitting food for a lady of the Konohana family. Tomonari thinks to himself. He realizes that although it must be nice coming from a wealthy family, it also comes at a cost. You aren't free to do what you want. In a way, that life makes it even worse than being a commoner. Konohana asks Tomonari to feed her, opening her mouth wide and pretending to be a fish. Tomonari smiles, moving the chip closer to her mouth, and she munches it in delight. Shizune sighs, warning Tomonari not to let Kagen see them behaving this way. Back at the Konohana estate, and despite just finishing school, Tomonari had to study in preparation for the next day. Not only that, but Shizune also had him participate in manners practice, where Tomonari would sit at a pretend dinner and learn how to use his knife and fork properly. He panicked as Shizune instructed him on the correct way to lay out his cutlery, and the work did not end there. Shizune then made him do a self-defense class with her, starting with 100 push-ups and ending with a spar. Shizune noticed how Itsuki was already physically strong, which made sense due to the nature of his previous work. As they fought, Shizune commented on how Tomonari's movements were really easy to predict. She told him that this is a major disadvantage as his attacks wouldn't work on anyone who is used to fighting. She easily managed to overthrow him, pinning him to the ground. Tomonari was defeated, pleading for a break. 2 hours later, the class finally came to an end. Tomonari collapsed to the floor, thanking Shizune for not going too hard on him. Shizune noticed that Tomonari was quite a quick learner, and he might do really well if he focused on developing his combat skills. Tomonari was, of course, flattered, but she went on to tell him that he was actually really bad at learning manners. Tomonari sheepishly apologized, sweating like crazy, so Shizune instructed him to take a bath. She handed him a book and explained that it contained all the profiles of the Kyu Academy students, asking him to check it out while he washed. Tomonari was annoyed that he needed to study even while he bathed, but his mind flashed to the amazing salary and decided that he couldn't complain. He told Shizune about how he met Tenuji today. Shizune was stunned, asking if Tenuji spoke with him. He noticed her facial expression and asked if there was anything wrong with that. Shizune told him it wasn't really anything to worry about, but gave him a heads up that Tenuji-sama and Ochu-sama are rumored to have a bad relationship in school. She went on to say that she wasn't sure how Tenuji felt, but Ohu-sama did not hold any grudges. The fact that the Konohana group and the Tenuji group were about the same size might also contribute to some sense of competition and tension between the two girls. Tomonari made his way down the hallway, guessing that Shizune's words simply meant that the relationship between Konohana and Tenuji was complicated. Konohana suddenly appeared from around the corner. She asked Itsuki what was wrong, then mentioned how he stunk of sweat. He told her that she was basically stating the obvious. Konohana followed him as he walked, asking where he was going, and Tomonari told her that he was on his way back to his room to take a bath. Konohana then took hold of his hand, asking him to follow her. With his hand in hers, Konohana led Tomonari away. Tomonari asked her where she was taking him, and she responded that they were going to her room. She opened the door to reveal her bedroom. Tomonari was in awe of how large and spacious it was, with a massive bed, French windows, and a crystal chandelier. His room could not even compare to Konohana's. Konohana opened another door to reveal a huge bath. He thought that whoever designed this house must have gone a little overboard. Tomonari asked her why she brought him here, to which she suggested that they should go in together. Tomonari was shocked at the proposal, but Konohana had already taken her clothes off to reveal a tiny swimsuit. Tomonari muttered to himself anxiously, and Konohana asked him if he had something to say. The two sat next to each other in the bath, and Tomonari commented on how Konohana must get lonely in a bath so big. She sighed as the water hit her skin, telling Tomonari how good it felt. Tomonari kept his eyes straight, telling himself not to think about it too much, but he noticed how beautiful and charming Konohana was. At least her physical appearance was. He got out the book that Shizune gave him and started to read. Konohana asked him what it was, and he told her that it contained profiles of their classmates. Tomonari noticed that all the kids at the school were heirs to large companies or the children of politicians. He turned to Hinako to ask if she was close with anyone she had class with. She bluntly responded, "No." Tomonari asked if that was true, especially considering how many students flocked around her in school. She told him that they were not her friends. Tomonari thought about how quick her responses were. He concluded that Hinako must be treated specially, whether that was for better or for worse. After all, it seemed like everyone who approached her were more like her followers than her actual friends. He turned back to her, asking Konohana if she had ever wanted a friend. She paused before telling him that she was okay, as long as Itsuki was with her. Tomonari laughed and thanked her, knowing how much she must trust him by now. Konohana stood up, flustering Tomonari before asking him to wash her hair for her. Tomonari nervously gulped, asking if she could wash it herself, but she argued that Shizune usually did it for her. Konohana told Tomonari that it was part of his job too, leaving him with no choice but to stand behind the girl and start washing her hair. He noticed how delicate and soft it was. Konohana was enjoying herself and then decided to start taking her top off as it was getting in the way. Tomonari freaked out, asking her to please not take her clothes off around him. She insisted that she was hot, but Tomonari told her it was already strange for a girl and a guy to take a bath together. Konohana pulled her top off, arguing that it was strange for her to wear a swimsuit in the bath anyway, and the only reason she wore it was because Shizune told her to. Tomonari asked Konohana if Shizune knew all along that they were going to bathe together, and Konohana nodded. The moment became too intense for Tomonari. Shizune, standing behind the door, looked infuriated with him. He got his act together and rinsed off Konohana, who thanked him sweetly. She requested that it become a daily routine for Tomonari to wash her hair for her every night. He became flustered at her suggestion. They got dressed and Konohana was taken away by another maid. Shizune was outside the door ready to speak to Tomonari. She told him he did a good job and he asked how long she had been watching. She told him that she was watching from the start. He looked down, embarrassed, realizing that she must have seen everything. Shizune told Tomonari that she had prepared for his changes in the dressing room, before handing him a bottle of pills. She explained that the pills would basically make him relax. Tomonari freaked out at the suggestion, as Shizune continued that it would help if he took a pill every time he got an indecent thought about Konohana. Tomonari imagined the pills turning him into an actual maid. The next day in school, Tomonari attends gym class. The arrangement was for second-year classes A and B to play badminton, with the girls on the eastern courts and the boys on the western courts. Tomonari was still flustered about the bath situation from yesterday. Taishu asked him what was wrong, and Tomonari snapped out of it, telling him that it was nothing. Taishu commented on how muscular Tomonari was looking, and Tomonari smiled at the compliment. The reason he looked so good was because of all the physical activity he was made to do as part of his job. He looked around the gym, noticing how large it was. Taishu explained that the Kyu Academy gym was more than 3,000 square meters. Tomonari was stunned, realizing that the school gym was the same size as an event hall. Their instructor told the boys in the class to do some free training after their warm-up and then continue with the match. Tomonari straightened up, wanting to make a big effort as it was his first PE lesson at the school. He started warming up, and the game began. Despite being a commoner, Tomonari could keep up just fine when it came to sports, with the other students playing at a similar level to him. Taishu suggested they take a break until it was their turn to have a match. They were shortly joined by Asahi, who smiled at Tomonari and greeted him. She told him that she watched him play and that he wasn't bad at all at badminton. Tomonari told her that he was quite confident in his sporting ability, also mentioning that he noticed Asahi was quite good too. She smiled, realizing he noticed. She also enjoyed sports, with Taishu adding that Asahi was also a talented skater. She gave Taishu a compliment back, saying she was impressed with his golf skills. Tomonari listened to the conversation and asked if the school taught golf and skating too. His friends agreed, also letting him know that second-year students participate in polo. Tomonari had never heard of such a sport, and his friends explained that it was a ball game played on the back of a horse. Taishu told him he was also really fond of horses. Tomonari panicked as he learned more about the traditions of the school. It turned out that he would probably need all of Shine's help that he could get. The three friends looked over as they noticed how intense the match was getting. The match was played by Konohana, and Asahi commented on how Konohana was not only academically gifted, but also great at sports. Tomonari thought that she must be great at everything. She mentioned that although Konohana was good at sports, she wasn't the only one at Kyu Academy who bore this reputation. On the court, a girl named Miyakojima was titled the winner of the match. Tomonari asked if the girl was famous, and Asahi introduced her as Miyakojima Narika, noticing how Tomonari wasn't aware of her name yet. Although the girl wasn't as famous as Konohana, she was quite popular for her sporting abilities. Her aura was more like that of a cool girl, although her most known personality trait was that she came across as cold and intimidating. Two students approached Narika after the match, but they ran off, seemingly scared when they came face to face with her. Asahi summarized her as quite a scary person who didn't engage much with other students and always looked tense. Taisho went on to say that there were a couple of rumors about Miyakojima, that she was from a dodgy family or a gang. Taishu admitted that he wasn't sure if the rumors were true, but ultimately she was very closed off. Asahi admitted that one time she did approach Miyakojima, but she ran off before they could speak. Taisho let Tomonari know that it was their turn on the court, and Asahi suggested that she return to her side of the gym. After the class ended, Taishu and Tomonari walked through the school, obviously exhausted. Konohana was mobbed by students who asked if she was willing to have a match with them. Tomonari was relieved to see her preoccupied with the other students. At least it gave him a sense of a break. He suddenly noticed that he had left his shoes in the changing room and let Taisho know that he was running back to get them. He made his way back to the changing room and spotted his shoes. As he bent down to pick them up, he repeated Miyakojima's name in his head. He remembered Kagen mentioning that he did a background check on Tomonari's family, and mentioned that there was a lady of the Miyakojima family at Kyu Academy. Kagen had said that it would be unlikely they would clash, but Tomonari should try to avoid unnecessary contact with her. Tomonari stepped out of the changing room as fast as he could to avoid being late for his next lesson. On his way, he accidentally bumped into a figure. He apologized, asking if she was okay. He looked up to see that it was Miyakojima. He darted away, but it was too late. Miyakojima called back, asking if he was Itsuki. Tomonari muttered, "Nope," still attempting to escape the situation. But then Miyakojima shouted out his name before dashing after him. She knew it was Itsuki. She jumped into Tomonari's arms, telling him how much she missed him. Tomonari insisted that they take a step back to talk. It turns out that a long time ago, Tomonari was taken care of by Miyakojima's family. The next chapter begins with Miyakojima straddling Tomonari, tears forming in her eyes as she realizes who he is. Tomonari was once under the care of the Miyakojima house for a short period of time. Tomonari's parents were always poor, which troubled the family to a point that nearly led to divorce. His mother and father were constantly blaming one another for their gambling addiction, and one day it all became too much for his mother, who left with Tomonari when he was a little boy. But his mother was disowned by most of her family, leaving her with little choice about where to go. The only place she could turn to was the Miyakojima house, as his mother was a relative. Tomonari's mother told him that his grandparents' lifestyle was far from admirable, so she chose to cut ties with them as well. But even young Tomonari knew that there was a limit to how shameless you could be. So his mother spoke to her distant relatives, and it worked. She and Tomonari were taken in by the Miyakojima house. Although there were concerns among the family who discussed Tomonari's family and their gambling addiction, wondering if they would be a bad influence on Narika. Tomonari wandered around the house, which was considerably larger than his own. He heard a little girl's voice and came across a figure whacking a post. Tomonari made the mistake of moving, which made a sound. She asked who was there. Tomonari stepped out of the shadow and stuttered. He introduced himself as Tomonari Izuki and explained that he had never seen a dojo before. This angered the girl, who told him that she hated weaklings. She had heard about him from her servants and disapproved of how he did not have a job. She yelled that she would give him a job while he was there, to take care of her. It turns out that the girl was Miyakojima Narika, daughter of the Miyakojima house. Since Tomonari's first day of meeting her, he was made her servant. She called for him at least 10 times a day, for issues as simple as catching a bug or being a shoulder to cry on when her father told her off. Tomonari would pet her head when she was upset to comfort her. But Tomonari found it difficult adapting to his new home, feeling like he wanted to cry himself. Miyakojima would tell him that he was much stronger than her. She went on to say that she admired how he did not cry when adults got angry at him or when he saw a bug. Narika was physically strong but not mentally resilient, and as the daughter of the house she could not really turn to anyone. Tomonari thought about her situation and realized that she must have been waiting for someone to be there for her. Miyakojima would tell him that, as a woman of the house, she had a desire to be strong, but the only thing she lacked was courage, especially considering the fact that she could not go out alone at the age of 10. Tomonari was already aware, even at a young age, that the outside world could be a dangerous place. Miyakojima was afraid of the outside, but she was jealous of her classmates who were able to walk home alone after school. Tomonari listened to her vent and suggested that she could go out with him. Miyakojima was stunned by the offer, but Tomonari insisted that it should be fine since they would only be out for a little while. He held his little hand out to Miyakojima, who took it, sealing the deal. The two went out into the town for the first time. Miyakojima was amazed by the outside world and loved it. For the first time in her life, she felt free. She asked him what all the buildings were, asking to go inside. Inside the shop, she tasted unmaibu for the first time, which she loved. Miyakojima thanked the shopkeeper and wandered outside again with Tomonari. The two continued to visit the town a couple more times. They had to be really careful as they would have been in big trouble if the servants found out. They kept getting away with their visits until one day they were caught. Miyakojima's father was furious. He yelled at Tomonari for bringing danger to his daughter, asking how he was ever going to take responsibility if something happened to Narika. He kicked Tomonari and his mother out that day, which did not surprise Tomonari at all. He was convinced that his uncle would kick them out sooner rather than later anyway. He and his mother left immediately, with Tomonari taking the responsibility for supposedly putting Narika in danger. Narika was heartbroken and called after Tomonari as he left. She promised him that she would become strong as her parents pulled her away. So the flashback ended, confirming that Narika and Itsuki are cousins. Miyakojima freaked out in the hallway of the Kyu Academy, not letting go of Tomonari. Tomonari asked her to calm down, explaining that it would be bad if someone saw them like this. But Miyakojima was so happy that she could not even move. Tomonari told her that she should be fine after a short rest, and suggested she go to the resting beds. He dropped her off and excused himself, but she insisted that he not leave her. He explained that he needed to return to class, but she continued to cry. She asked him what happened after he and his mother were kicked out of her house, and he calmly told her that his parents spoke to each other to resolve their differences. Miyakojima said that it was good to hear that his parents got back together, but he should have updated her on his life. She admitted that she was worried after he left. Tomonari was conscious of how much time he was spending with Miyakojima, but gathered that Hinako must be in class right now, so it would be okay. He told his cousin that even if he had tried to contact her after he left, he doubted that her family would have delivered the message. He apologized for bringing her danger, even if it was too late now. Miyakojima was shocked at his apology, and told him that if anything she should be thanking him. If it weren't for Tomonari bringing her outside, she would have stayed a coward. She went on to say that he was the reason why she changed. Although Tomonari questioned her eagerness, telling her that she still seemed a little shy. She looked down, ashamed. She told Tomonari that it was something she was still working on. Tomonari said that her father was still strict, so her personality made sense, especially since she did not have much freedom in her life. But Miyakojima told him that she had actually won against her father. She had won in kendo, judo, aikido, karate, and other martial art competitions, and that was the only prerequisite for her to roam free without an escort. She was delighted to tell Tomonari that this meant that she had won her freedom, although it could get quite lonely with no one accompanying her. Tomonari told Narika that he had heard that there were some strange rumors going around school about her. She told him that they must just be some misunderstandings. He asked her how such stories even came about, and Narika explained that it had something to do with the Miyakojima house. It turns out that her family house is full of martial artists, with their motto being that a sound mind is a sound body. So since she was a child, she had been taught all kinds of martial arts. Because of that, it was not abnormal for other students to assume that she came from a violent background. But to make matters worse, she was quite bad at making friends. She admitted that she got nervous when she had to interact with others, which was the main reason why other students did not understand her. Tomonari understood where she was coming from, confirming that she had always been like that. In fact, the same thing happened when Tomonari met his cousin for the first time. Miyakojima admitted that she got so nervous that she couldn't communicate well, and people thought she was glaring at them. She told Tomonari that people had started to call her a yakuza or something. She looked over at Tomonari and begged him to help her. Tomonari was saddened by her story. It really seemed like Narika's life was filled with misfortunes. He told her that he wanted to help but was obviously hesitant when he remembered his current situation. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and despite Narika's wailing, he told her that he needed to pick this one up. He picked up the phone and Shizune asked where he was. He explained that he was near the infirmary when a student fainted in front of him. He wasn't lying after all. Shizune told him that she noticed that his location was far away from Konohana, which made her worried, as he did not have any alternative classes scheduled. She applauded him for helping a fellow student but reminded him not to forget his duty. He realized that he probably should get going soon. He returned to Miyakojima, who was ready to interrogate him with more questions. She asked why he was at Q Academy, especially since she knew he came from a poor family, and the only people enrolled in the school were from rich, or at least influential backgrounds. He told her that his parents won big in their usual gamble, which was why he was able to attend the school. Miyakojima knew that he was lying, as the school would never accept a student who came from a gambling family. Tomonari was unsure of what other excuse he could make, so Narika asked him if it was because of something he could not tell her. His phone buzzed again and he apologized to Narika. She freaked out, noticing that he was about to leave her again. Tomonari explained that he needed to pick up the phone, but she begged him to wait. She was still really traumatized from Itsuki being taken away from her as a child. He noticed that she was worried and promised her that they would be able to meet again. She accepted his words but asked for a head pat before he left. He was confused by her request, but she explained that it was something he used to do for her when they were kids. He lifted his hand and placed it on her head, and she loved it. She finally felt calm again. Miyakojima admitted that she thought they would never see each other again, so she remembered him patting her head as a precious memory. Tomonari told her that she didn't really look like a second-year high school student, and she told him that she knew. She told him that they needed to meet again soon. Tomonari called her name and apologized for leaving her so suddenly. The two gazed at each other, smiling at the fact they were reunited. And out of nowhere, Konohana appeared. She was smiling but assertively asked Tomonari what he was doing. Tomonari and Miyakojima were stunned to see Konohana appear. Tomonari asked her why she came to the infirmary, while Miyakojima rambled that the reason Itsuki was with her was because he came to help when she randomly fainted in the hallway. Konohana explained that she was feeling unwell, so she had to excuse herself from class. Tomonari thought that Shizune must have been calling again to let him know that Konohana was on her way. Konohana asked Miyakojima if she hit her head somewhere since she saw Tomonari giving her head pats. Miyakojima began to stutter nervously, but eventually blurted out that she had known Itsuki since they were children. Konohana questioned what was being said, but Miyakojima continued to say that Itsuki had been living with her since she was 10 years old, and he would always take care of her. Konohana remained composed but kept asking questions about their relationship. So, Miyakojima made an excuse for her behavior, explaining that she was only excited to meet Itsuki again, and that she felt like she owed him a lot in return. Miyakojima turned to Tomonari and asked if he was able to go to her house again, just to hang out for a bit. Tomonari awkwardly responded that he would, only if she would be okay with that. Miyakojima continued, saying that she thought it was okay for them to rebuild their relationship and be like it was in the past. Their intimate discussion was interrupted by Konohana, who told her that it wouldn't be happening. Although she was assertive, Konohana smiled at Miyakojima as she explained that Tomonari was working at her home right now. Miyakojima was silenced by her words and she asked Tomonari if that was the truth. Tomonari told her that it was true, but he knew that if he were to explain to her that he was working for the Konohana household, she would find out the truth about Hinako. By her knowing, it could compromise his position. It was his duty to be by Konohana's side. He whispered to Hinako that he wanted to keep the truth a secret, but Konohana calmly asked him why. By this point, Miyakojima was freaking out. She asked him again if he was working at Konohana's home. He paused before telling her that it was the truth and that he was working as her caretaker. Miyakojima was devastated to hear this, telling him how unfair it was. Konohana remained nonchalant as Miyakojima broke down. She tried to explain how much Tomonari meant to her, but she couldn't string together a sentence as she cried. Konohana calmly explained that she didn't know about Tomonari and Miyakojima's history, but at the moment Tomonari was working in her home. Konohana then turned to Tomonari and told him that Narika seemed to be doing better. and it might be time for him to return to class. Tomonari agreed, and Konohana slyly mentioned that she too felt better and would be joining him. Miyakojima continued to stutter but had no words left. Tomonari explained that he was Hinako's caretaker, so he couldn't go against her will. He apologized to his cousin before walking off. He joined Konohana's side and asked her if she went to the infirmary to look for him especially. She admitted that it was the case, that she always got lost by herself, so she made up that she was feeling unwell, and had another student take her to the infirmary. Tomonari apologized for not being by her side for a while. Tomonari asked her what her reaction was about, and that Shizune had mentioned that they needed to keep their relationship a secret. Konohana turned to him with a serious look on her face. She began to say that she just thought she needed to warn Miyakojima. Tomonari questioned her statement, asking what Narika needed to be warned about. He then wondered if Konohana was jealous, with memories of her clinginess coming to his mind. He remembered all the times she would insist on sleeping on him, having him feed her chips and washing her hair. His theory made sense. Konohana looked him in the eye and asked him whose caretaker he was. He replied that he was hers. She accepted his response, telling him that it was good that he knew that. Konohana finally smiled at Tomonari, telling him that it was time for them both to get scolded by Shizune. Although Konohana was sarcastic, Tomonari panicked that Shizune would really fire him this time for his neglect. But when he met with the maid again after school, she reassured him that she was not looking to fire him. Actually, from what Konohana told her, she was okay with it, and that it might just cause further misunderstanding if they tried keeping it a secret. Shizune admitted that not knowing that Tomonari had an acquaintance in the school was a mistake. Tomonari asked how much Shizune knew about his relationship with Narika, and Shizune replied that she was only aware that something had happened with her second cousin. She went on to say that she believed the Miyakojima household was hiding the rest of the information as they were cut off from his family. Shizune continued that it might be time to give Tomonari a proper explanation. She asked him to tell her that he was working for the Konohana household, and to come to some form of agreement with Narika. Tomonari insisted that Narika isn't the type of person to gossip or spread information. Shizune told him that the new story should be that Tomonari was with Konohana for the sake of training to become the successor of a corporation, that he was living in the Konohana household as an apprentice. She firmly told him that he needed to keep the truth about Konohana a secret. Shizune continued to lecture that if it were up to her, she would have wanted it to be a secret that Tomonari was working for the Konohana household too, but it might cause more trouble after all. She was briefly interrupted by another maid who asked her to sign some paperwork. Tomonari questioned what trouble it would cause. Shizune explained that it might cause trouble when they look for a partner for Konohana, as having a male classmate living in her house and working for her might not leave the best impression. Shizune looked down at Konohana and told her that she was clinging to Tomonari like a koala. She asked the girl if something was wrong. She asked if Konohana was worried about Narika, but Konohana only asked for more head pats. Tomonari accepted and stroked her head. Shizune continued to say that ever since Tomonari had joined, Konohana had been acting strangely. Tomonari apologized, but Shizune told him he was not at fault. He looked down at Konohana, his gaze lowered, causing Shizune to ask if he was okay. The chapter ended with him admitting that there was another matter he needed to discuss with Shizune. At school the next day, Tanuji congratulates a table of fellow students on their enrollment into the Kyu Academy. She tells them that the school is quite strict compared to other schools, but if you manage to graduate from the Kyu Academy, you will be guaranteed a successful future. Sat at the table were Asahi, Taishu, Tomonari, and Konohana. Tanuji turns to Tomonari and tells him that she is looking forward to studying with him. Tomonari politely thanks her as other students ask who he is. He remembers Shizune's words and realizes how close he is getting to other students. He explained to the maid that he was invited to a social event the other day, and it looks more suspicious when he turns down invitations rather than if he was to accept them. He told Shizune that it might be a good idea for him to socialize with the other students. Shizune understood where he was coming from. She let him know that he should tell her beforehand, but otherwise it would be okay for him to hang out with his peers. Tomonari thanked her. In school, Konohana was clung on to Tomonari's side as usual. The students greeted each other a good morning until the bell rang, signaling the start of the first class. Asahi and Taishu approached Tomonari, asking if he was free after school today. Tomonari was smug to say that he was free, and he was finally able to join his friends. He was happy that he brought up his concerns with Shizune. Now he can tell her that he has plans after school, so will be back at the house a little bit later. He asked his friends what they were planning for that evening. Asahi had an idea to go to Taiwan, but Taishu argued that it would be too much of an excursion, taking 6 hours of traveling. He suggested it might be best to remain within Japan this time. Taishu recommended some good shops in Kyoto, and Asahi brought up how there are some nice bamboo shots around the same time. Tomonari cringed as he mentioned that he does need to be back home at a reasonable hour. His friends then thought out going to the cafe inside the academy, a place which was meant for tea parties that students can host, And since it was inside the school, there was no need to worry about the dress code too. Even though the cafe was popular among students, it was quite traditional. Tomonari suggested sticking to the cafe and the cafeteria. He was worried that his manners were not up to scratch for anything too formal. Asahi told him that it was a good idea, and she suggested that he could invite others if he wanted to. She told him that he was the star of the day. Konohana told Tomonari that she will join in on his plans. Tomonari asked if she was sure. He brought up how he is happy for her to tag along, he would just need to let Shizune know in advance. Konohana gulped before whipping out her phone. She told Tomonari that she will call Shizune herself. On the phone, Shizune accepts the proposal since she has already discussed it with Tomonari, but she asks Konohana if she is definitely okay with attending. Konohana reassures her that it is fine. Tomonari was confused over Shizune's hesitance. Would it not be a good thing for her to establish closer relationships with her schoolmates? Tomonari mentions that Taishu and Asahi will be joining, and he asks Konohana if she knows them. It turns out that Konohana only knew their names. Tomonari reassures her that it will be an opportunity for everyone to get to know each other, so there is no need to be worried. Konohana looks into his eyes and clutches hold of his shirt. She tells him that as long as he is going, she will be too. Tomonari accepts her eagerness and plans for 4 were confirmed. Back in the classroom, Konohana speaks with a bunch of other students who wanted to ask her advice on their class. Tomonari looks over to her and their eyes meet. He sees it as a chance for him to go to the restroom, considering Konohana was preoccupied. He thought about Konohana on the way, wondering if she was really coming after school. She did say that she wanted to make friends after all. He returns to the classroom to spot Miyakojima, sitting all alone at her desk. She hears the other students discuss their social plans and looks down, seemingly upset. Tomonari realized how out of place she looked. He wondered if it was worth bringing the tea party up to her. Miyakojima looks up and spots Tomonari, and her eyes light up. She rushes over to him, telling him that they should talk as she has nothing to do. Tomonari implied for her to calm down, as he watched her get overexcited again. He realized how lonely she must have been. He heard other students discuss that Tsushima remembered someone's name, and that he must be from another class. Tomonari sweated as he realized he shouldn't be in this class, and suggested moving the conversation to outside. In the courtyard, Miyakojima apologized for coming across too strongly. Tomonari told her that he wanted to speak with her as they were cut short last time. He told his cousin that he has been adopted by a CEO, who he calls his father now, and through a connection he was sent to the Konohana house to study business. Tomonari explained that it was basically leak and apprenticeship. Narika argued that he could have done that at her house, but Tomonari explained that the first that came to mind was the Konohana house sadly. Narika told him that his background means that he would not have a stable standing. Although she voiced her concerns over Tomonari's tale, at least she wasn't challenging it or bringing up Hinako. Tomonari swiftly changed the conversation to ask Narika if she was free after school. He asked if she wanted to hang out in the cafe. Narika stuttered excitedly as Tomonari explained that it was just a tea party, but she didn't need to force herself to come. He was cut off mid-sentence as Narika burst into tears. She was delighted to accept the invitation, explaining that it had always been her dream to attend a tea party. She also mentioned how she heard whispers of tea parties but was never invited, and she was worried that at this rate she would graduate all alone. Tomonari put a hand on her shoulder and empathized with her as she sobbed. She thanked Tomonari but voiced yet another concern. Narika explained that not only does she struggle with social cues, but people are scared of her. She explained that her house is quite big and successful, which can overwhelm other students. Narika then brings up Konohana, how she also comes from a famous family but manages her social life so effortlessly and casually. Narika hated the fact that Konohana had Tomonari as her caretaker too, but was still impressed with her nature as she can imagine that normally people would be intimidated by her too. Narika was quite jealous of Konohana's social skills and wondered how she needed to act to be more like her. Tomonari thought to himself that Konohana really has got people believing her act, but he tells Narika that he does not know what Konohana does especially, but she would be able to talk with Konohana at the tea party. Narika was shocked to hear that Konohana was joining, leading Tomonari to explain that there are 4 people planning to attend the tea party. Narika freaks out, worrying that she won't be able to hold a conversation with anyone. Tomonari tells her that it may be fine, causing her to stress out more. He reiterates that it will definitely be fine. Tomonari runs to his next class, bumping into Tenuji on his way. She turns to look at him as a fellow student thanks her for saving her. Tenuji asks Tomonari if he is the guy from the other day, and Tomonari asks what she is doing there. She responds that she is helping the luggage from day duty. Tomonari then realized that the girl was kinder than she looks. She tells him that it seems like he is a transfer student, and Tomonari tells her he is. She let him know that there is a rumor that he has been going to school with Konohana since his first day, and asked Tomonari if the rumor was true. He agreed, but told Tenuji that he asked Konohana to show him around, and they are not traveling together anymore. He went on to explain that it was only their families who had a relationship, but Tenuji cut him off swiftly. She told Tomonari that he might as well admit that he is a member of the Konohana sect. Tomonari questioned what was meant by her comment. Tenuji bitterly told him that it was a nickname that she gives to Konohana's followers, and Tomonari asks if she means like a type of fan club for Konohana. He asked the girl if she hates Konohana, judging from her tone. Tenuji became defensive and told him that she doesn't hate her. But because of Konohana, her prestige was fading away. She told Tomonari that she was just as pretty and smart as Konohana, but her family name was just as big as the Konohanas. In fact, her family has an even longer history, which further proved her point. She asked why Konohana is the only one who is pampered by the entire school. Tomonari hardly cared for her whining, which Tenuji noticed. She angrily asked if he was part of the Konohana sect too. In fact, Tomonari was only shocked over how good of an impression Konohana was making. It's not like she wouldn't roll up in bed the second she has come. Tenuji went on to rant, asking what exactly makes Konohana more popular. Is she more approachable? She questioned the reality of Konohana's attitude. Surely it can't be sustainable to always be smiley, top of the class, and perfect in every way. Tomonari told Tenuji that she surely is well informed about Konohana, which annoyed Tenuji even more. She told him that she needs to know her enemy in order to win the battle. Tomonari wondered if Tenuji was also lonely and miserable, just like his cousin Narika. He thought that it was a shame that she had this poor opinion on Konohana. As they both come from similar backgrounds, they could consider each other as equals. Tenuji finished her rant by confirming that she and Konohana were rivals. Tomonari changed the conversation to ask Tenuji what she is doing after school. He told her about the tea party in the cafe and asked if she was willing to join, letting her know that Konohana will also be there. Tenuji gasped at the proposal, asking Tomonari if he was planning to take her to his rival's territory. He shrugged off her dramatic accusation to tell her it was a simple invitation. Her eyes narrowed as she said that she will join if Konohana wants her there so desperately. Tomonari let her know that Konohana did not actually say anything about her. This burst Tenuji's bubble. To save her ego, Tomonari made up that Konohana may have mentioned something about asking Tenuji to join. Tenuji was smug after hearing this, telling Tomonari that she would come. The tea party begins and Taishu and Asahi chat away as the others begin to arrive. At the table is an anxious Miyakojima Narika, a confident and poised Tenuji Mirei, and finally Konohana, who was sitting looking as relaxed and peaceful as ever. Tomonari joined to be playfully attacked by Taishu, who was impressed by famous names sat at the table. Taishu asked him how he was connected to the amazing people, and Tomonari shrugged, telling him that he just went with the flow. It was a rare sight to see the three ladies in one spot. Tenuji butted in, telling Taishu that it was Tomonari's welcome party. She turned to Tomonari, congratulating him on his transfer to the Q Academy. She explained that he may find the school to be stricter than what he is used to, but he will be guaranteed a bright future upon his graduation. She kindly told him that she is looking forward to see everything that he will accomplish in the future. Tomonari was flattered by Tenuji's words as he thanked her. Tenuji introduced herself to the rest of the group, followed by Asahi, who tells everyone that her family owns a retail business. Taishu went next, mentioning he comes from a shipping background. Konohana bowed as she introduced herself, telling the group that it was lovely to meet them. Miyakojima was the last to introduce herself. She stuttered as she told everyone her name. Tomonari took over the conversation, noticing his cousin's struggle. He introduced himself and announced that his family runs an IT company. Tenuji let them know that there isn't any need to fret about each other's background and they should all speak normally. Tomonari agreed with her. Tenuji then turns to Konohana to tell her that they have already met at a tea party. Konohana smiles warmly, telling her that she is right, also that she is really thankful for Tenuji. Tenuji is bitter about Konohana's words, confused as to whether to take it as sarcasm or not. Asahi then turned to Konohana to ask if she remembers her as they are in the same class. Konohana was charming to Asahi, complimenting that she does know her and she loves how much Asahi lifts the class's spirits. Asahi was stunned by Konohana's words and thanked her. Jumping into the conversation, Taishu asks Konohana if she knows who he is too. Konohana is just as lovely to Taishu, calling him kind and saying how high she thinks of him. Taishu is flattered. He can't stop blushing at Konohana's words. Tenuji is enraged. Why is no one asking her anything? Tomonari turns to Narika and asks her if she has ever spoken to anyone on the table. Narika speaks out that she has decided not to participate in too many activities outside of school, causing whispers amongst the table. Tomonari then realized that he has to explain what his relation to Narika is. Narika began by explaining that she has known Itsuki since being 10 years old, and that is the reason why she was invited today. Taishu and Asahi respond curiously to the reveal as Tomonari sits nervously. Narika sweats as her social anxiety begins to get the better of her. Tomonari argued that Narika is not a scary person. She was simply just misunderstood as she spent most of her childhood alone. He shut down the rumors about his cousin. Tenuji commented on how she recognizes Miyakojima's name, as her family are sport goods makers. Miyakojima nervously told Tenuji that she was right, asking how she knew. Tenuji smiled and told Miyakojima to not be so modest. Everyone in the school knew about the Miyakojima family. Tenuji also commented on how the rumors about Narika were silly and unbelievable. Tenuji asks Narika how she usually spends her time outside of school, and Narika answers honestly that she is usually training. The question extends to Konohana, who is asked what she usually does at home. Konohana responds with the perfect script, that she usually studies, reads, and eats snacks. When questioned about what snacks she eats, Konohana responds that she likes scones. Tomonari laughs on the inside. If only everyone knew that all she does is sleep and eat chips. But the others bought Konohana's words, commenting on how that is what they imagined that she did anyway. Taishu asked what type of relationship Tomonari's family had with Konohana's. Konohana answered that her father and Tomonari's father are acquaintances. Asahi mentions how wonderful it is that they can all sit at the same table as friends now. But Asahi asked Tomonari if that really is all there is to his and Konohana's relationship. Konohana sipped her tea mysteriously, as Taisho playfully told Asahi to stop being so suspicious. Konohana's silence made the situation even more awkward, as Tomonari jumped in with some waffle. He explained that there was nothing special between him and Konohana. He explained that their parents knew each other and that's it, and that he wouldn't be a good match for Konohana anyway. Konohana mumbled that he was right, as she took another sip of tea. Asahi noticed the tension and let the question go, saying that Tomonari probably already has his hands full with his studies until now. Miyakojima was listening in from afar, noticing the lies. Tomonari was called out by Tenoji, who questions his manners as he drinks his tea. She explains that it is more elegant to bring the cup to your mouth instead of the other way. Tomonari sweated as he thanked her for her input. Taishu mentioned how Tomonari did come from a normal school before moving over, which would be why he is not used to the manners here. Taishu went on to say that he has heard that normal schools have quite interesting traditions, such as splitting the bill or kleptomania. Tomonari explained that splitting the bill simply meant that everyone paid their portion. Taishu asks Tomonari if his school had any similar traditions, and Tomonari brings up the 3-second rule. Tomonari teaches Konohana about the 3-second rule. He picks up a part of his scone and drops it to the table. He picks it up and to the rest of the table's horror, he eats it. He explained that when you drop something, you can still eat it as long as it is under 3 seconds. Taishu and Asahi were stunned at the practice. Konohana then picked up a scone and dropped it to practice the trick. Tomonari sweated as he watched her copy him, suggesting that it may not be wise for her to imitate him. Hinako still munched away at her scone. Everyone at the table was shocked over how fast Konohana dropped her manners, despite her graceful appearance. Hinako shrugged the action off, mentioning how commoners do come up with interesting rules, but the 3-second rule cannot really be a good thing. Asahi mentioned that the rule does make you feel like dropping your food isn't an issue. Tenuji brought up that she may try the trick too, but Konohana did not approve of the rule, arguing that it shouldn't be a matter whether it's safe or not to eat the food, rather it was shameless. Tomonari looks over to Konohana, telling her that she did have a good point. The students made their way to the pickup point, and Asahi's driver arrived first, apologizing for the lateness. Asahi blushed when her driver greeted her formally, asking him to not call her his lady. Tomonari noticed Taisho also get into Asahi's car, and he asked why they were both traveling together. Asahi explained that both of their houses are nearby to each other, and it wasn't a big deal anyway as they had been friends for so long anyway. Taishu mentioned how it also gives them a chance to take turns between their servants. He thanked Tomonari for organizing the tea party. Tenuji yelled after Konohana as she began to make her way. Konohana stopped to turn to Tenuji, who told her that despite it being their first ever tea party together, it was not bad at all. She continued to say that it would be great if there would be another chance for them to discuss school or their houses. Konohana warmly agreed to remember to arrange something soon. Tenuji was thrilled to secure another meeting with her so-called rival. Tenoji turned to Tomonari, mentioning how she was happy that he was able to keep his posture straight today. She darkly tells him that he looks better with his back straight. Tomonari awkwardly thanked her, as Miyakojima commented how close they looked. Tomonari defended the fact that she was only being polite. Miyakojima told him that Tenuji is a very straightforward person, and he should take any kind words she gives to be a genuine compliment. Tomonari asked why his cousin seemed angry, and she responded that he was lucky to be given that treatment after only 3 days in the school. Tomonari heard his and Konohana's name being called. It turns out that Shizune had finally arrived. She approached Tomonari, who was still with Miyakojima, and introduced herself to the new face as Konohana's maid. She firmly explains to Narika that Tomonari was under the Konohana house formally from now on, so she would appreciate it if Narika kept his past a secret. Clearly intimated, Narika promises to keep Tomonari's past to herself. Shizune thanked her. Tomonari wondered if Shizune made the effort to collect himself and Konohana in order to meet with Miyakojima directly. Shizune prompted the two to make a move with her, but Tomonari nervously looked over at Narika, who was still alone. She mentioned how her car would be late. He asked Narika if her pickup was close by and that he wouldn't mind staying with her until it arrives. Narika asks him if he is sure. Tomonari turned back to Shizune to tell her that he will be escorting Narika so she is not by herself. Shizune accepted his plan, mentioning how Konohana had a busy evening so will head back, but will arrange for another car to pick up Tomonari later. He thanks her, and Shizune asks Konohana to confirm that she is alright with the new arrangements. She smiles kindly and agrees. In the back of her car, Konohana breathes out. She found the day to be really tiring. Shizune tells her that she did well today, but Konohana looks back, sad about the fact that Tomonari went with someone else. Shizune notices her fatigue and lets her know that she could have said no to the plans. Konohana listens to Shizune's advice as she looks out of the window, quietly saying that maybe she should have. Shizune apologized for letting Tomonari go with Narika, but she knew that if they were to stop him, it would have looked suspicious. It turns out that ever since Tomonari joined the Konohana house, Konohana seemed to change for both the better and for the worse. Up until now, Konohana joined tea parties under her father's order, but for the first time she did it under her own initiative. Konohana agreed with Shizune's insight before dropping her head into her seat. Shizune asked if she was alright, and Konohana breathed that she may be hitting her limit. Back at the school pickup, Tomonari asks Miyakojima what is wrong as she stretches out. She explains that she can finally relax. Tomonari tells her that she already seemed quite relaxed during the event, but she argues that it's not fully her that he saw. She mentioned how it was thanks to the other students' help that none of her bad sides showed up to the party. Tomonari thought that it was a good point she made. Asahi did make an effort to include Narika in the conversation, and Tenuji naturally pulled her into the chat too. Narika thanked Itsuki, mentioning how if it wasn't for him, she might have remained alone until her graduation. Tomonari shrugs off her words, telling her it wouldn't have been that bad and he only helped her a little. But Narika was thrilled, telling him that she is convinced that today is the day that her life will change. She told Tomonari that he really was her hero. He taught her all about the outside world when she was little and saved her from being alone. He smiled, but she would not calm down with her words. She told him that this was why she cannot accept him working for the Konohana house, crying at how unfair it was. She asked him why he needs to stay at the Konohanas as he has her again now. She asked what he was doing other than working as a stay-at-home apprentice, and that he must be doing something else too. Tomonari calmly tells her that he needs to take care of his master too, but Miyakojima disputed his words, not believing that the perfect Konohana needed any further support. She asks him when his training will be over, and to her disappointment, Tomonari responds that he does not know. She asks if he would consider going to her house after that. Tomonari told her that he would consider her offer. Back at the Konohana house, Tomonari once again gets obliterated by Shizune during his self-defense class. She dismisses the session and Tomonari thanks her. Konohana appears in the training room and begs Itsuki for a bath, but Shizune explains to her that she needs to speak with Tomonari first. Konohana agreed to go back to her room as long as they don't take too long. When she leaves, Shizune explains that she does not want to keep Konohana waiting too long, so we'll cut to the chase. She tells Tomonari that she believes Konohana will faint sometime soon, so be careful. Tomonari was shocked to hear this, asking if Konohana was sick. Shizune calmly told him that he just needs to be careful, and ordered him to return to Konohana. In the bathroom, Konohana was already changed into her swimsuit. She was delighted to see Tomonari, who apologized for the wait. Tomonari agreed to get started on her hair as he brought the faucet to her scalp. He asked if anywhere was itchy as he began. Konohana told him that it feels different from last time. She noticed Tomonari's concerned expression and asked if he was okay. He reassures her that it is nothing. He changes the subject to mention how Shizune could make a separate chamber within the bathroom, which would provide more privacy for Hinako to wash herself. He asks her to pass him the bucket, and Konohana accidentally drops it to the ground. She mentions the 3-second rule, picking the bucket up and passing it over. Tomonari laughs that he is happy he taught her that trick. He lowers his gaze as his eyes catch Konohana, telling her that he will wait here. But she asks him about his time with Miyakojima and what they spoke about in private. Tomonari tells her a generic answer, that they only spoke about the tea party. He kept his eyes to the ground, thinking about how it felt wrong to watch her when she was only in a swimsuit. But Konohana clung on to him despite his appeal. She tells him that he is her caretaker so he shouldn't go anywhere. And suddenly, Konohana loses her balance before sinking to the floor. Tomonari panicked, asking her what was wrong, but it was too late. Hinako was completely unconscious. Tomonari yelled her name, realizing what had just happened. The next chapter begins with Shizune and Tomonari looking over Konohana as she rests in her bed. A damp cloth lies across her forehead. Tomonari mutters that she has a light fever, and Shizune glances over at him with concern. She asks if something is wrong, to which Tomonari eventually responds by asking how Shizune can be so calm given the situation. Shizune looks at Konohana as she sleeps and explains that this is actually a regular occurrence. Tomonari, puzzled, asks what she means by that. It turns out that the reason Konohana collapsed was due to the intense pressure of having to put on an act every day. Tomonari questions whether Shizune means that Konohana has to constantly watch her behavior in front of others. Shizune agrees, explaining that Konohana's duty to maintain appearances burns her out completely, so it's no wonder her body eventually gave in. Tomonari grows frustrated with Shizune's calm demeanor, and demands to know why neither she nor any of the other servants seem alarmed by Konohana fainting. He questions why everyone just goes along with it. Despite the toll it clearly takes on Konohana, Shizune bluntly replies that although Konohana has collapsed, she'll recover in a few days. There's no need to worry. But her words don't reassure Tomonari, who wonders aloud whether it would be better for Konohana to stop pretending altogether if it's harming her. Shizune does not appreciate his prying and tells him to know his place. She explains that this is the will of the Konohana household and not something for him to interfere with. She ends her lecture by stating that Konohana herself agreed to the arrangement. She is allowed to relax at home, but when in public she must maintain the image of the perfect girl. Tomonari looks down at Konohana, who sleeps soundly. He clenches his fist in anger. Shizune continues, noting that Konohana behaves more like her true self when she doesn't have to wear the mask. She's more lively on those days. Tomonari lowers his head, admitting that he didn't know any of this. Shizune advises him to clock off for the night and get some rest, especially since he has school the next day. Tomonari asks if she really expects him to go to school without Konohana. Shizune firmly tells him that regardless of Konohana's condition, he needs to stay on top of his grades. Tomonari argues that he thought it was his duty to care for her. Shizune reminds him that although he is her caretaker, he's not what Konohana needs right now. She firmly orders him to return to his room, and Tomonari finally relents. The next day, as instructed by Shizune, Tomonari goes to school alone. Taisho and Asahi chatter eagerly, telling him the tea party was a blast. Tomonari forces a smile, but it doesn't take long before Konohana's absence is noticed. Taisho and Asahi ask if she's away for the usual reason. Tomonari asks what that reason is, and they explain that from time to time, Konohana takes time off school to help with family matters. They comment on how her life must be full of responsibilities. Tomonari stays quiet, realizing how no one suspects the real reason behind Konohana's absence. He finds it troubling that not a single student knows what she's going through. If no one knows the truth, who's left to worry about her? Even though Konohana wears a mask to hide her true self, it's shocking how that mask prevents anyone from supporting her during tough times. Deep in thought, Tomonari returns to his books. After school, Tomonari returns to the Konohana estate where Shizune greets him. He immediately asks how Konohana is doing. Shizune tells him that she's still resting but should be well enough to return to school after the weekend. Just one more day of attending alone. Tomonari asks if Konohana's father Kagen has come to visit, but Shizune replies that he's far too busy with his duties. Tomonari is shocked that Konohana's father hasn't even checked in on her. Shizune defends him, saying that as president of the company, no emergency would allow him to abandon his work. Tomonari then asks if Konohana's mother has at least checked in. Shizune informs him that her mother passed away. Tomonari is silenced, realizing how little he truly knows about Hinako. He's only worked for the family for a short time, but it's clear. If her father rarely visits and her mother is gone, Konohana must be suffering. Who's left to be there for her? Snapping out of his thoughts, Tomonari calls after Shizune to suggest canceling today's training. He asks if he can stay with Konohana instead. Shizune harshly declines, but says that if they finish early, he may visit her. As usual, the training session ends with Tomonari completely defeated. Panting, he thanks Shizune for ending early. After changing, Tomonari heads to Konohana's room and knocks gently on the door. Inside, Konohana lies in bed. She weakly calls his name, smiling as she sees his face. Tomonari apologized for waking Konohana up, but she told him that she was getting bored anyway. She looks into his eyes and thanks him. She was happy that he came by to visit and was super happy to see him. Tomonari sat down on the end of her bed, telling her that he was her personal servant, so of course he would pay her a visit when she is sick. This made Konohana giggle. Tomonari asked if there was anything he could do for her, and she held out her hand, asking if he could hold it. He placed his hand into hers. It was not long until Konohana closed her eyes again, drifting to sleep. Tomonari watched over her as she rested, realizing how big her room was. He thought how it was normal to feel depressed when you're sick, that's why it is important to have someone at your side. He wondered what Konohana really thought of him. Did she see him as cheap labor? Someone who could be replaced in an instant? He shook away his negative thoughts, instead remembering the time he spent with her on the school grounds, her head resting in his lap. Deep down, he knew how close they were becoming to each other. He knew that ultimately, Konohana completely trusted him. But was that enough for him? He snapped back to reality, knowing that it was silly to think about those things now. He put his hand down to caress Konohana, which made her gently stir in her sleep. She muttered, "Dad." Tomonari was stunned by what she just said, and at that moment he knew that Konohana must think of him like family. He held onto her hand before bringing it to his lips. He understood his role now, and deep down, he knew that it all made sense. The reason why she wanted to lay in his lap and take baths together. It was more the longing for a familiar type of warmth that only family could provide. He could understand her desires. The feeling of wanting a family was one that Tomonari knew all too well. With Konohana's parents being either dead or absent, she only had her servants. But even that arrangement was more formal than friendly, leaving Hinako more alienated than ever. Shizune walked into the room. She greeted Itsuki and asked how Konohana was getting along. Tomonari told her that Konohana has only just fallen asleep, and Shizune pauses. She tells him that there is a matter she must tell him about and asks if he is able to step outside for a moment. Tomonari attempts to move, but Konohana's hand is clenched firmly in his, despite her being asleep. Shizune offers to speak to him at the bedside instead. Shizune explained that she needed to talk to him about the circumstances of the Konohana household. She asked Tomonari if he remembered why Konohana had to put on an act. Tomonari thought about her question, remembering how she told him about the poor financial position of the Konohan group, and how it was important that Konohana finds a suitable partner to marry to try and improve the situation. Shizune informed him that reason was only one part of the plan, and the real reason as to why she needed to put on a mask was so the Konohana house could take in a son-in-law. Tomonari questioned this, asking if it was true that Konohana being a bride was not the main purpose, but instead it was the group who wanted to take in the person she marries. Shizune brings up Takuma Konohana, Konohana's older brother. She mentions how he is the true heir of the Konohana household. However, the company did not trust that he was adequate enough to inherit all of the company. In that case, if Konohana's brother is not selected as the heir, then it will be whoever Konohana marries who will succeed. The head of the family's wife would also be heavily involved in the group, where both would be leading the company with that arrangement. So ultimately, Konohana needed to be perfect, to earn the respect of others. If Konohana were to earn a bad reputation, there could be undesired sacrifices that the group would need to make. The group's total assets are nearing 300 trillion yen, and of course everyone in Japan is well aware of the empire that is the Konohana group. Hinako Konohana must be involved as the daughter. Shizune finished her explanation by telling Tomonari that she hopes that he has an idea of what Konohana must go through. Tomonari looked back at Shizune to ask if there was anything he could do for her at all. Shizune responds that if Tomonari wishes to lend her his strength, she cannot stop him. Tomonari intervened, bringing up yesterday's conversation, which ended with Shizune telling him to know his place. Shizune stood by her words, telling him that he must continue to support Konohana, whilst also being mindful of his social position. That is the role he must take as her servant. So it turns out that there were several reasons why Hinako had to keep up her perfect girl act. The first being for her to keep up with her big brother Takuma Konohana. The second is so she can find and support the future son-in-law of the household. Tomonari closed his eyes, knowing that he did not want Hinako to be in a position where she is burdened by these pressures. He sat up in his bed knowing that this would be impossible. Tomonari stood in front of his mirror as he tidied up his uniform, thinking about the traditions of the Konohana group. He knew that nothing here would change, particularly not under the influence of a mere employee like himself. He swept the hallways, still deep in thought. He knew that he was still eager to at least try and make a difference for Hinako's sake. The best he could do was to continue to support Hinako as her caretaker. Ultimately, just as Kagan said, the role of being Hinako's caretaker was to protect her reputation as a perfect lady, and to try and prevent her true nature from being exposed. Tomonari knew that it was his duty to provide support for her in the shadows. Tomonari gazed over the sleeping Konohana from afar as she stirred in her sleep. He knew that the arrangement was not right, and that his role should be to allow Hinako to take a breather, to help her relax after her draining routine of putting on a show, and become someone who she can be her authentic self with. That was something he would be proud of doing, and as he approached her bed, he told himself that it would be something that he would do. He kneels down next to Hinako, and tells her that he wants to protect and be kind to her. In fact, he can't help but protect her. He continued to speak to the sleeping girl, taking hold of her hands. Even though she had such tiny hands, she was carrying such a great burden on her back. Tomonari swore that he would give her the warmth of a family she was searching for her sake. Monday came, and Hinako was finally on her feet again. Her and Tomonari set off for school early in the morning as she asked him to let her sleep on his lap again. Tomonari moved closer to Konohana, who collapsed into his lap. As usual, she was wanting to sleep. Tomonari reached down to give her head pats, gazing lovingly as she rested on him. Konohana looked up to meet his eyes before asking him if something happened. She brought up how he seemed much nicer than usual. Tomonari stayed silent as he gazed out of the window. At school, the pair were greeted by Asahi and Taishu, who welcomed Konohana back. They asked her if she was doing okay after her day off. Konohana responded warmly and chirpily, mentioning how she is fine, and the reason why she was away from school was to help with the family business. Of course, no further questions were asked. The students expected nothing more benign from Miss Perfect. At lunch, Konohana knelt in front of Hinako, who asked her to open her mouth wider. Konohana did as she was told as Tomonari fed her. Flustered, Tomonari thought that the dynamic between himself and Konohana was quite different from that of a normal family member. Konohana told Tomonari that she will feed him a carrot next, to which Tomonari declined. He knew that this was one of her tricks to avoid eating her vegetables. Although he would usually let it slide, Tomonari knew that he had a duty to take care of her, even if that included encouraging her to eat healthily. He knew that he needed to respect her needs more than her wants. He told Konohana that if she does not have a balanced diet, she might become more prone to getting sick. Konohana responded apathetically, mentioning how it's more fun staying at home and sleeping all day anyway. Tomonari asked her to not say such words and that it makes him happy to see her healthy. Konohana gazed into his eyes before giving in. She eats the carrot. Back at the Konohana estate, Tomonari sits with Shizune as they eat within the servants' quarters. Tomonari thanks Shizune for the meal. Shizune tells him that although his movements are still awkward, he has massively improved when it comes to table manners, grasping all the basics. Tomonari thanked her for her positive feedback before clumsily getting up. Shizune instructed him to improve his departure and he apologized, mentioning how he got too relaxed after finishing the meal. Tomonari then asked the maid where Konohana usually takes dinner, realizing that he has never seen her eat a meal in the mansion. Shizune informs him that Konohana usually takes her meals alone in the dining room, and is never joined by servants who would only watch over her from a distance. Tomonari innocently asked if it would be possible for him to join Konohana for dinner one day, to which Shizune declined firmly. She told him that he needs to finish his table manners lessons before dining with the lady, and when he does, his request can be reconsidered. Shizune informed Tomonari that starting from tomorrow, he would have the responsibility of waking Konohana up. Tomonari responds in confusion, as he has never done such a task. Shizune reminds him that as he is in training, the number of tasks he does will be gradually increased. She also reminded him that as Konohana's caretaker, he is ultimately responsible for everything that involves Konohana, starting from when she wakes up and until she goes to bed. Tomonari told the maid that he understood. During the staff meeting the next day, Shizune announced that there were no changes to the schedule, so all tasks were to be carried out as planned. As the meeting was dismissed, Tomonari thought how he had never helped a girl wake up in the morning before making his way to Konohana's bedroom. He approached her bed, seeing Konohana curled up, her eyes closed as she mumbled in her sleep. Tomonari began to panic. Was it okay for him to wake her up normally? He darted to the side as he was greeted quietly by other servants who reassured him that he would be fine. He smiled, realizing that he was actually becoming more and more close with his colleagues. Tomonari took a deep breath before trying again to wake up Konohana. He told her that it was morning. Konohana, with her head buried in the pillow, begged for 3 more hours of sleep. Her words stressed out Tomonari even more, who was worried about her being late for school. He told her that it was time to wake up, opening up her curtains to try and help her. And then Konohana finally sat up, confused to see Tomonari in her room. She asked him sleepily to help her out of bed before sinking into the sheets again. Tomonari smiled, asking if she would like him to pick her up. He held onto her hands, pulling her into his chest. Konohana smiled as she wished Tomonari a good morning. Tomonari instructed her to call after him when she had finished changing. He could finally relax now the girl was up and out of bed, but Konohana was not willing to give him a break yet. She called Tomonari back, asking him to help her change. She held her arms out, waiting for him to take her nightdress off. Tomonari's eyes widened in distress. Konohana sits on the bed, waiting for Tomonari to come and undress her. Of course, Tomonari is stunned at the request. How has it gotten to the point where he needs to change her? He thought his only task for this morning was to come and wake her up. He remembered Shizune's words, that it was his responsibility to take care of everything that is within his role. He went up to Konohana, who was waiting patiently. He asked her to excuse him as he unbuttoned her shirt, his hands shaking like crazy. He tried to calm himself down, but the situation had him completely flustered. He thought that, although it was an awkward situation for him, at least it meant that Hinako trusted him. And to honor that trust, He knew that he needed to get rid of all of his unnecessary thoughts. He undid the final button on Hinako's shirt, pulling it off to reveal a matching set of underwear. Hinako's figure was beautiful, but Tomonari knew that he needed to stay composed. There was a knock at the door and a voice asked Tomonari if he was in there. Tomonari bounced up in embarrassment, telling the voice he was there. The voice mentioned that whilst Konohana was half asleep, she may make strange and unreasonable requests, such as asking for assistance when changing. The voice warned that Tomonari should not give in to such demands as a man. Tomonari, now sweating like crazy, stuttered a response. He wondered if he should just apologize for the misunderstanding. Instead, he waffled that he would never undress Konohana. The voice, which turned out to be Shizune, took Tomonari's word and told him that she trusts him. She declared that she was willing to put her faith in him the same way Konohana does. Tomonari turned to Konohana, hearing Shizune leave the door. He asked Konohana if she could keep it a secret that he helped to change her today. Konohana agreed, but only if he would agree to help her change every morning. Tomonari cried out in frustration at her request. In class that day, students gathered around in union over a rumor that midterm exams were starting soon. Tomonari was confused. It was way too early for the midterms in his opinion, but Taisho explained that it was because of the opening ceremony for the Kyo Academy, which would take place earlier than other schools. Taisho handed some paper over to Tomonari, explaining that it was the past exam questions. Tomonari flicked through the questions and was bewildered by what he saw. Taisho asked if he was good, but Tomonari knew that he was in trouble. Even though he received extra lessons from Shizune, the paper contained a lot of information he was still not sure about. He knew that he at least had a week to prepare. At lunch, Konohana turned to Tomonari and asked him if there was something that was bothering him. Deep in thought, Tomonari apologized for his distant behavior and explained to her that he was concerned over the midterm exams, which were much harder than he imagined. Tomonari thought that he could maybe get through them if he memorized everything, but he could not stop himself from imagining the worst-case scenario, Shizune dismissing him over his bad grades. Konohana smiled as she offered to teach Tomonari. She showed him her sachet, which was awarded to her for being the top student in the school. Tomonari remembered seeing Konohana tutor other students in their class. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea, but he shuddered at the thought. He was meant to be the one taking care of her, not the other way around. But at the same time, he couldn't imagine rejecting her offer. Konohana was thrilled that he accepted, and Tomonari wondered why she was so excited to tutor him. Back in class, Asahi reassured Tomonari about the midterms. She kindly let him know that he could always ask her for help if he needed it. Tomonari asked if her and Taisho had any special plans when it came to studying, and they asked Tomonari if he ever had any arrangement with his previous schoolmates to help each other prepare. Tomonari shrugged, only mentioning how he used to pull all-nighters. He also told them that they would sometimes host study groups. Asahi and Taisho were amused by the idea of a study group, and Tomonari elaborated that it was a thing where they would all gather round and study together. That way, you can teach each other things that you don't understand. Tomonari warned that although study groups were sometimes helpful, it was easy to get distracted at the same time. But Asahi really liked the idea, and Taisho suggested that they should host one with all of the participants of the tea party. The pair asked Tomonari when he would be free to join, and at first he was surprised that they wanted to involve him. But of course, his friends insisted on him participating. Tomonari wanted to accept, but he was worried about Hinako, knowing that he did promise that he would study with her. Back at the Konohana estate, Tomonari brought up the plan to host a study group to Shizune, who at first was not obsessed with the idea as she had a schedule planned for Tomonari, but eventually she accepted the change in timetable. Tomonari apologized to the maid, knowing that she must have worked hard to help him prepare for his exams, but Shizune reassured him, knowing that he would probably learn more from his peers anyway. She finished their self-defense class and told him to make his way to Konohana, who was waiting for him. On the way to Konohana's bedroom, Tomonari thought how merciless Shizune was, but he was happy that he was finally getting used to his schedule. He stepped into the bathroom where Konohana was waiting patiently, dressed in a tiny white bikini. In the bath, Konohana listened as Tomonari explained his new study plans to her. He asked her if she was upset. Konohana mentioned how she was the one who was meant to teach him, before looking into his eyes and asking if he was dissatisfied with her. Tomonari got up, asking her to wait. He came back with a stick of ice cream and handed it to Konohana. She took it in confusion as Tomonari told her that he bought it in secret. Konohana tasted it and claimed it to be the most delicious thing ever. She devoured it while still in the bath, clearly enjoying herself. Tomonari smiled as he watched her. The ice cream had clearly improved her mood, but eventually the ice cream melted under the heat of the bath. Konohana looked down at the puddle of ice cream and mentioned the 3-second rule. Tomonari bluntly told her it does not work with liquids. But Konohana looked down, seemingly depressed. She was seriously sad over melted ice cream? Tomonari promised to buy it again for her, but reminded her to forget about the 3-second rule, especially when she is around others. Konohana nodded before asking when the study group will be held. Tomonari told her that it had not been decided yet, but he was thinking that the sooner they host it, the better. Konohana told him that she will also attend. Tomonari went quiet over her plans to join, and asked her if he could speak to her about something. He asked if she was definitely sure about this, mentioning how the reason why she got sick was due to the tea party. He did not want a repeat of what happened as a result of the pressure that Konohana was exposed to. But Konohana turned to him to tell him that taking the easy path is not always the best thing. And deep down, Tomonari knew she was right. He knew that although it was easier for her to be alone, it would not bring her happiness. He held onto her wrists and carefully pulled her up before telling her that he would be happy to go to the study group together. The study group was hosted 2 days later, and Asahi and Taishu were excited as ever. Taishu was smug to be present amongst the Kyu Academy's top-performing students, Konohana being first place and Tenuji being second. Tenuji joined just in time to announce this. Taishu complimented Asahi, telling her that her grades were also really good, and also Miyakojima. Miyakojima did not agree with their kind words, mentioning how she was only good at PE and history, but had basically failed in all other subjects. Asahi apologized for bringing it up. The boys changed the topic, knowing that they did not have the leisure to discuss others' grades, especially Tomonari. Tenuji warned that if they want to succeed, they need to give it their all. She then proposed the idea to split the group into 2, the first being those who need to be taught and the other being those who should teach. She nominated herself, Asahi, and Konohana as the leaders, with the boys and Miyakojima as the students. Tenuji then turned to Tomonari to ask him which subjects he struggles the most with. Tomonari responded that he needed the most help with subjects he could not memorize, such as maths for example. Konohana began to speak, but she was interrupted by Tenuji, who offered to tutor him. Asahi offered to help Miyakojima, suggesting that although she was not super talented in any particular subject, she was not bad at any either, and that of course left Konohana to tutor Taishu to his excitement. Konohana smiled politely. The study session began and the students got their heads down immediately. Tomonari was shocked over his friend's intense focus. Back at his old school, they would have been chatting away at least 30 minutes into studying, but of course he expected nothing less from students of the Kyu Academy. He was really grateful that they were all like this after all. Asahi looked down at Miyakojima's work and applauded her, but Miyakojima was already exhausted, leaving Asahi with no option but to offer her a break. Konohana also offered Taishu a break, who accepted in relief. Miyakojima gazed over at Tomonari before asking him if he would like to take a few minutes too. Tomonari thanked Tenuji for her offer, but insisted that he would like to keep going. Tenuji gave him a nod of approval, as the other students admired how invested Tomonari was. They noticed that Tomonari's only limitation was his lack of self-esteem, but he was very capable in supporting others and pushing them forward. Tomonari could hear his name being discussed, and he asked Tenuji why she kept looking at him in a weird way. Tenuji reassured him that it was nothing, it was just that she had a great eye for people's character. In fact, all the servants that worked for her were actually handpicked by herself. Asahi asked Tenuji if she believes that Tomonari has a bright future ahead of him, and she agreed. She disclaimed that it would be rude to treat a fellow classmate as a servant, but she also believes that Tomonari has great potential, and she would be much obliged if he would ever consider working for her. Asahi was stunned at the offer, telling Tomonari that it would be a fantastic opportunity to work for the Tenuji house. Tomonari stuttered, conscious of the fact that Konohana was right behind him. Tenuji ended the awkward interaction by insisting that she and Tomonari take a break too. Your brain works better after resting after all. Tomonari accepted the plan and got up from his seat, announcing that he was going to go on a short walk. Tomonari wandered outside, relieved to finally have a moment to think. He was grateful for the friends he made at his new school, especially since he initially went into the academy believing it to become a great burden, but he was surprised over how supportive everyone was. He knew that he needed to try his best in school as he really did not have any excuse now. He turned around and jumped, seeing Tenuji standing right behind him. He asked if she was also on a walk. Tenuji replied that she also wanted to relax her body for a bit. Tomonari opened his mouth, but he was interrupted by her, who admitted that taking a walk was not actually why she was here. Tomonari paused as she told him there was something she wanted to ask him about. She looked him into his eyes and asked if he truly was the heir of a company. Tomonari was silenced by Tenuji's question. Had she fathomed him out? He thought about the consequences of his fake identity being discovered. All he could ask Tenuji was why she doubted what he told her. Tenuji responded bluntly, telling him that it was his table manners. Tomonari stuttered, asking her if his table manners are too clumsy. Tenuji told him that it was not that his table manners were incorrect, it was just that his movements did not seem natural to her, almost as if he had the knowledge of what to do, but was not entirely confident on how to execute it. It was a small detail, but enough for her to raise her suspicions. She reassured him that she did not bring it up to stress him out, but she was simply curious. It turns out that the other students were not alarmed by Tomonari's mannerisms. In fact, the way he made sense to them, as he was a transfer student. But Tenuji would not drop her prying. Tomonari asked her to directly say what she meant. Tenuji told him that it was strange how he was doing everything correctly, and that it was even stranger how his knowledge was so far ahead from everyone else. She thought that he had been putting a lot of effort in the past few days he had been at the school. Tenuji finished by telling him those were the reasons as to why she believed him to be lying about his family status. Tomonari was shaken by Tenuji's theory, as he remained in silence. He had no words left. Tenuji let him know that if he does not want to discuss the matter further, she would be willing to drop the conversation. Tomonari paused before asking if she had not found it to be strange. He continued to say that the school does not enroll any student that they find to be weird or suspicious, so how has he passed the background check for the Kyo Academy? Tenuji did not know how to respond to Tomonari's counter-argument, so reiterated that she was only being nosy. Tenuji began speaking but did not finish her sentence by asking that he is also, but instead she dropped it, asking Tomonari to please ignore what she had said. She suggested for them both to return to the others. Back in the study, the students gathered in conversation, sipping tea. Tomonari returned with Tenuji, and they were warmly welcomed back by Asahi. Asahi told them that they were discussing hosting another tea party at Konohana's house, to which Tenuji responded curiously. She asked if they were referring to the tea party held at the Konohana household every spring. The others smiled, knowing that it was expected that Tenuji had heard of the famous event. The Konohana tea party was usually held around the week after the midterm ends. It was a prestigious event, with the tea party's guest list being made up of famous and influential figures. Tenuiju was asked if she was going to attend, to which she responded that she was not, since it was a social gathering intended for adults, not to mention the fact that the Tenouji and Konohana families have a very delicate relationship. Tenuji was pretty blunt in describing the tension between the two households, ending her excuse with saying that she was not prepared to enter the belly of the beast. She asked Miyakojima if she had ever attended the tea party, and Miyakojima answers that she hasn't, as she is bad in such social situations. Asahi mentioned how she would love to attend on the other hand. She loves putting on dresses and getting dolled up. Taishu smirked, telling Asahi that she would even look lovely in a dress. Konohana sweetly offered to send an invitation out to Asahi, who replied in excitement. Konohana promised to send one out in the next 3 days. Taishu asked if it was too late for Konohana to extend the invitation, but she told him that it was no problem, and Taishu cheekily asked if he could attend as well. Konohana explained that she was told that she could invite anyone, should the opportunity arise. She just had not done so until now. Both Taishu and Asahi were really happy about their initiation, and told Konohana that they were looking forward to it. Tenuji glanced over at the interaction, thinking to herself that it must be fate. She confidently turned to Konohana to tell her that she would also be participating this time. They were sitting at the same table and studying together after all. Tenuji finishes by mentioning how Konohana should not treat her as a daughter of the Tenuji family, but instead as a friend. So on this basis, she will be accepting the invitation to the Konohana tea party. There was a moment of anticipation before Konohana smiled, telling Tenuji that she was looking forward to it. Tomonari mumbled that he would also participate, as her caretaker albeit. He asked Miyakojima if she was also planning on attending, and she stutters as she accepted the invitation. So plans for the tea party were all confirmed, and the group continued to study for the midterms. And in no time, the exams began. Tomonari sat in class, uniformed with the other students. They listened to the teacher discuss the regulations and rules of the examinations. Tomonari thought about all of the subjects that were still new to him, such as economics, which were not taught in his previous school. The examinations were over in a flash, and Tomonari held his head up in pure relief. The rest of the class erupted into conversation. Some asked about the questions, others turned to Konohana to ask her how she found the exams. Konohana took time to speak with her peers, leaving Tomonari some time to excuse himself in the bathroom. On his way out, he bumped into Miyakojima, who looked completely drained. She smiled when she saw him, announcing that she had probably failed all her exams. She asked Tomonari how he was, to which he replied that he thinks he at least avoided flunking. Miyakojima told him that she knew that he would beat her academically, on top of leaving her as a child and working for the Konohana family. She thanked him for reiterating how worthless she was as a person. In an attempt to crash her pity party, Tomonari told his cousin that her words were not true, but she already wandered off in emo mode. Tomonari and Konohana were reunited in her family car, where she collapsed into the seat, demanded head pets. Shizune congratulated Tomonari for finishing his exams, asking him how he found them. Tomonari responds that he thought he did well, especially since he was able to answer most of the questions. He thanked Shizune for her help. Shizune let him know that there should be nothing to worry about, particularly since he performed well in his mock exams. She applauded him for all the effort that he put into studying. Tomonari thanked her. He was also proud of himself for pulling through. Shizune gave Tomonari the heads up that Kagen had scheduled a dinner party on the day after tomorrow, which Tomonari would also be attending. The guest list consisted of the president of Chikamoto Shipyard and several other business partner executives. This company was a subsidiary of the Konohana Group. Shizune explained that Konohana met with the president when she was only 7 years old, and the businessmen requested to see her again, to witness how much she had matured. Tomonari probably thought to himself how creepy that sounded, but Konohana was apathetic, mumbling how annoying the request was. Shizune advised that Tomonari would be attending on the day of the dinner party, as he would more than likely have ample opportunities to participate in social gatherings in the future. There was no harm in him becoming accustomed to them early on. She finished by suggesting that he makes the most out of the opportunity, observing how the dinner party works as a servant of the Konohana family. Tomonari gulps, telling Shizune that he understands. 2 days later, Shizune, Konohana, and Tomonari began their journey to the dinner party. Shizune asked Tomonari if he likes his new suit, an Italian top-of-the-line outfit costing only 700,000 yen. They arrive at the venue and are advised that the guests will be arriving shortly. Tomonari asks if the venue was another Konohana family property, to which Shizune responds that it is the family villa. Konohana was advised to make her way to the front desk, but she locked eyes with Tomonari before leaving, making him notice how much of a young lady she looked in her dress. Konohana called Tomonari's name before letting him know that she was on her way to meet a strange uncle. Tomonari told her to at least make it sound like it was not a crime. Konohana reassured him that she would do her best as Tomonari gazed at her. He let her know that he is rooting for her, and once the dinner was over, they could relax at the mansion again. Konohana smiled, letting him know that she wants ice cream again. And in no time, Konohana had departed, leaving Tomonari with Shizune. Shizune asked about Konohana's ice cream comment, making Tomonari sweat, trying to not look suspicious. Konohana was finally reunited with her father Kagen. He looked down at his daughter, telling her it had been a while since they last spoke. He began by asking her about her exam, to which Konohana responded that they went fine. Kagen told his daughter to keep up the good work and to not be ashamed of being the daughter of the Konohana family. He moved the conversation to Itsuki, asking how he was getting along in his new position. Konohana smiled, hearing his name. She let her dad know that he was the best. Kagen was taken back by Konohana's sweet words. It was rare to hear Hinako praise her caretaker. Konohana told her father that she wants to continue to spend time with Itsuki, and her father was surprised, yet supportive over his daughter's enthusiasm. He told her that he is happy to see that everything is working out for her, but has not got any undue influence over the matter. Konohana asked her dad what he meant, to which he responded that Tomonari is a civilian, and Konohana does not need to follow him into the mundane world. He tells Konohana it is time for them to go and asks her to behave herself. Konohana obediently agreed. In the drawing room, Kagen thanked his guests for attending. An old man dressed up in a suit assured Kagen that he was here because he wanted to be. He reached his hand out to Konohana, who bowed respectfully. The old man reminded her that they met when she was only 7 years old. He told her that he has heard a lot about her since. In fact, the son of an acquaintance of the man attended the Imperial Academy, and Konohana was known as the perfect lady amongst his circles. Konohana thanked him politely for his kind words. Konohana remained as the topic of conversation, with the strangers mentioning how she was as good as everyone said she was and how proud her father must be of her. Kagen, clearly enjoying the attention, added that although Konohana was his daughter, she had grown up to be such a good girl. He thanked the gentlemen for their compliments before ushering them to the outside table. Tomonari and Shizune were standing uniformed outside. Tomonari could not help but to watch the event unfold. The guests began to eat. Shizune whispered to Tomonari to ask him how he was finding the dinner. All Tomonari could say was how their manners were suitable. Every movement they made was natural, but you could still tell how considerate they were. Shizune assured him that they were displaying what real manners were. Subtle enough that no one feels suffocated, yet polite enough to show respect. At first glance it may seem like a formality, but the sense of cooperation that arises from mutual respect for common rules actually creates a stronger bond of trust. Manners were often disregarded nowadays, but it remained an integral etiquette, especially for the upper class. Shizune finished by saying that manners are to gain trust not by words, but instead by attitude. It was necessary as they were in a position where they could not say what they really felt, and that is why breaking the conduct would be extremely disrespectful. Back at the dinner table, the old man reiterated how much of a nice girl Konohana was. He told Kagen that he is convinced Konohana would be able to choose as many marriage partners as she liked. Kagan let him know that although it would be a blessing for him, nothing had been decided yet regarding Konohana's hand. It was not long until the old man was mentioning someone to match Konohana with, who came from a notable background with a family trading overseas and with celebrity clients. The man told Kagan that the person was hoping for a woman with good manners. Kagan's eyes lit up at the proposal. He thought of all the business opportunities he would get from making connections with the shipbuilding company. He didn't even think it was necessary to discuss if the person was a suitable match for his daughter or not. The old man continued to waffle about how he believes the person to be in his early 20s as Kagan was too distracted by his own success to think the offer through. He imagined that even if this proposal didn't work out, it may at least lead to another one. Kagan told the man that he would put the proposal into consideration, but the man was already committed to the idea, leading Kagan to reassure that he would think about it seriously, and then dessert was served. The man was thoroughly impressed, mentioning how the dessert was his favorite. Kagan agreed that the plate was delicious, and then a small crumb of dessert fell on the table. The crumb came from Konohana's fork. The old man asked Kagan if it would be okay if he shared the matter with his acquaintance, and Kagan agreed. He added that he did not want to boast, but he could definitely vouch for Konohana's beauty. With all eyes on Konohana, Kagan began to continue his speech, but Konohana had already placed her fork onto the plate and reached out to the fallen crumb with her hands. Despite the horrified looks, she placed the crumb into her mouth before whispering the 3-second rule. Kagan was shaken by what his daughter just did, as were the guests who remained silent. The old man muttered that Konohana was quite different from what he heard about her. From afar, Shizune, Tomonari, and the other servants witnessed what just happened. Tomonari asked what the consequences would be for Konohana's action. Shizune responds that she does not know, but considering Kagan's character, this is as bad as it could get. The dinner finished, and Kagan shook his guest's hand as they departed. He thanked them for visiting. The old man turned to Kagan, telling him that he was happy for the break. Kagan agreed, but it was not long until the old man brought up the marriage proposal again, and to Kagan's horror, the man asked the president to pretend it never happened. He mentioned that he needs to save reputation, and cannot speak on behalf of someone not present anyway. Although he would like to continue to be friends with Konohana in work and in private, Kagan hid his disappointment well, ending the conversation in agreement with the old man. And as soon as his guest's car sped off, Kagan turned to Shizune. He asked her who taught his daughter to behave in such an unsightly manner. Shizune paused before Tomonari rushed over. He admitted that it was him. The president admitted that he always thought whether a caretaker was necessary or not for his daughter. There was a big gap between Hinako's real personality and the one she shows while acting, and because of that, the role of the caretaker was to make up for any weaknesses that may emerge due to stress. But Kagan admitted that it was a roundabout way of doing things. From the beginning, he should not have allowed anything to go haywire. Mistakes happen because they all had a true personality, and the caretaker was there to encourage Hinako's dependency. Kagan turned to Shizune to tell her that from now on, Konohana should be thorough in her acting in both her public and private life. Shizune disputed his plan, raising her concerns for Konohana's health, but Kagan was steadfast to his plan, telling Shizune she must fix the situation. He blamed Konohana's poor health on the fact she is pampered, not as a chronic disease or direct result of the pressure. Kagan swore that it was his obligation to protect his family's name, and in order to do that, Hinako's personality must be completely locked away. Tomonari burst into the conversation, blaming himself for Hinako's behavior. He took accountability for the retracted marriage proposal. But to Tomonari's surprise, Kagan told him that it was not his fault. In fact, most caretakers of Konohana quit after a short period of time, and he was surprised that Tomonari did not do the same. Kagan expected that Tomonari's influence on his daughter would be trivial. Ultimately, Kagan did not blame Tomonari, as it was him who underestimated how easily influenced his daughter was. Tomonari was silenced by Kagan's words. Kagan finished his speech by announcing that he would give Tomonari his salary as soon as he returned to the mansion. Shizune bowed to the president, telling him that she understood. But Tomonari was confused. Why would Kagan be paying him so soon? Kagan turned away, and as he did, he announced that Konohana will no longer need a caretaker, and Tomonari's job would be ending today. Tomonari was kicked out of the Konohana estate. He sat in disbelief outside the gates. How could his life be turned upside down within a few hours? Shizune handed him some money before he was escorted out. It was intended to cover a place to stay if he had nowhere to go for the night. Tomonari looked at the cash before tossing it. He doubled over in frustration. The whole situation was a dream to begin with. Tomonari picked up his backpack and made his way, memories of Konohana flashing before his eyes. He wished the past few weeks were a dream. At least if that was the case, Konohana would not have to suffer. He sat on a ledge of a nearby park watching two girls laugh. One of them reminded him of Konohana with similar light hair. Why did Kagan tell him that he was not responsible for the incident that happened at dinner? Tomonari knew that it was himself who taught Konohana about the 3-second rule. Tomonari remained seated in his place, completely lost as to what to do next. He hears a familiar voice call his name. It was Miyakojima. She approached her cousin in concern before asking him what he was doing there. Tomonari looked up, surprised to see Narika. She was holding a bag full of sweets in her arms. She smiled, telling him she was out on a walk, one of the privileges she earned by defeating her father. She asked Tomonari if he was alright and if something happened. Tomonari sank back into his arms before telling Miyakojima the truth. Moments later, Miyakojima remained silent next to Tomonari. She reiterated what he just told her. Konohana made a mistake in public, and Tomonari was the one to take responsibility, getting fired as a result. Although the Miyakojima family was not as big as the Konohana family in terms of wealth and scale, the Miyakojima family was still sizable compared to most. Narika understood the situation as a result of this, knowing that Konohana must have been struggling. She asked Tomonari what happened to Konohana after the incident. Tomonari responded that he believes that she will be restricted in more ways than ever before, with privileges such as tea parties, study groups, and other social opportunities being taken away from her. Narika realized how strict the Konohana family must be, thinking that one failure would result in such severe consequences. Tomonari told his cousin that the incident was all his fault. If he hadn't taught her unnecessary things, none of this would have happened. He told her that after all, he was just a commoner who knows nothing about etiquette. He went on to say that he should never have gotten involved with Hinako in the first place. Tomonari's harsh words about himself made Miyakojima snap. She told him his words were not true, before holding his head to comfort him. She told him to remember the time they were kids, and she was prohibited from going out freely. She reminded Tomonari that it was him who changed her world. She went on to let him know that she remembers all the adventures they had together, how to shop, the buzz of the town, and of course them playing together in the park. If it wasn't for Tomonari, Narika would have never gotten to experience any of those things. She finished her lecture by telling Tomonari that she cannot express how grateful she was for Tomonari, and she reminded him that it would be the same for Konohana. After all, being raised without being taught anything except what is necessary, which was very lonely. Narika explained that she can't be the only one who felt this way, and she was sure that Konohana experienced similar feelings. Tomonari looked down in sadness. Miyakojima began to choke up. She tried to tell him to be confident but erupted into tears before she could finish. She cried as she told him that he looks cool. Tomonari thought that although it was trivial for him, his presence may be important to Hinako and Narika. He thanked his cousin for reassuring him, who smiled to see him looking better. Tomonari then got up from the park bench. He knew that Konohana trusted him, so he would be obliged to repay that trust by responding to Hinako's feelings. Picking up his backpack, Tomonari told Miyakojima that he was leaving. Miyakojima asked him where he was going in panic. He confidently told her that he was going back to the Konohana family mansion to talk to Konohana directly. Before Miyakojima could convince him otherwise, he had walked off. Miyakojima collapsed to the floor. She had really just sent salt to her enemy. She sat down on the grass, once again finding herself alone. Deep down, she did not regret her words. Tomonari was close to her, and she would have done everything she could to help him. But she wondered what type of relationship Tomonari and Konohana really had. Tomonari raced back to the Konohana estate. He knew he had not thought things through properly, but at least he was following his heart this time. He remembered Shizune telling him that she could not stop him from helping Konohana back around the time she was sick. As he approached the gates of the estate, he saw 2 security guards rush over. They immediately stopped him, clearly aware of Tomonari's suspension from the mansion. The security guards asked him if he was planning to meet with Kagen. Tomonari stood his ground, assuring them that he was planning to enter the estate again. He told them that Konohana needed him since no one else was there for her. Konohana gazed out of her bedroom window. Shizune approached her from behind, asking her how she felt. Konohana replies that she doesn't feel anything in particular, her eyes still fixated on the view in front of her. She turned to Shizune to ask her where Tomonari was. Shizune told Konohana that Tomonari had left the mansion, giving no further explanation to the young girl. Konohana was confused. Tomonari had been her caretaker for a month, which was a very long time in Konohana's opinion. Shizune was surprised how calm Konohana was considering the situation. She wondered if Konohana really did not feel anything about Tomonari's departure. Konohana suggested hiring Tomonari again as a servant, if he could not be a caretaker, or perhaps even a gardener, chef, or cleaner. There was a lot of work designated for cleaners after all. Shizune stopped Konohana to tell her the truth, that her father had no intention of employing Tomonari again. And reality finally hit Konohana, who stood in disbelief. She asked if she could see Itsuki, but nothing would change the situation. Shizune asked her to forget about Tomonari for now, as it would only upset Kagen more. Konohana bowed her head down in sadness, asking Shizune whose side she was really on. Shizune responded that she could only serve Kagen as her employer. Konohana whipped around, announcing that she was going to look for Tomonari herself. Shizune asked her to stop, pleading that her father would not let her off the hook that easily. But Konohana was steadfast. Shizune paused, before letting her know that she will excuse herself. But in her place, she will assign some more servants to guard Konohana's room. She warned Konohana to not do anything reckless, and it was then that Konohana realized that there was no way for her to leave. Servants stood uniformed around her door. Left completely alone in her room, she knew that Shizune would not understand. She grabbed all the sheets she could from her bedroom before swearing that she was from now on a woman who will decide to do whatever she wants. Back at the mansion gates, the confrontation between Tomonari and the security guards had escalated. The guards had stood their ground, aggressively pushing Tomonari away and telling him to leave. But Tomonari knew that Kagen would be leaving tomorrow, so it was his only chance to speak to him. And if he loses that opportunity, he might never see Konohana again. The guard grabbed hold of his shirt, pulling Tomonari to the ground. Tomonari began to freak out, but knew what he had to do. He placed his hand on the security guard's wrist before using all his weight to flip him to the ground in a thud. The other guard was shocked over his moves. But Tomonari remembered his self-defense classes with Shizune, who told him he had a gift for the skill. Tomonari managed to completely overcome the first guard before sprinting to the gate. He jumped up and climbed over, despite the second guard chasing after him. The guard yelled at him to stop, but Tomonari knew he was in a hurry. He sprinted towards the mansion gardens before hiding in the bushes. Catching his breath, he realized that he had lost sight of the security guard. Now it was time to worry about where he was going to sneak in. He remembered the time he wandered through the mansion hallways with Konohana at night, who told him where her favorite spot was. It turns out that sometimes Konohana would sneak out through a back door and foe to the garden. Back at the time, Tomonari joked that he could snitch on her, but Konohana knew that he would never do that. That is why she trusted him enough to tell him about the spot. Tomonari entered through the same door, and to his relief, no one was in the surrounding hallway. He began walking towards the direction of the office, before a sight out of the window caught his eye. He saw Konohana. She had made a rope out of all of her sheets and was halfway out of the window, clinging on to her life. Tomonari freaked out, yelling her name. What the heck was she doing? Konohana made it midway down the mansion walls as Tomonari sprinted towards her. He yelled for her to go back up before she hurt herself. But it was too late. Konohana pleaded with Tomonari to catch her before she had to let go. Tomonari ran over as her body fell, catching her perfectly in his arms. Tomonari asked her what she was doing, to which Konohana innocently replied that she just wanted to see Itsuki. She made a suggestion that they should make up that she is being kidnapped again. Tomonari began to run away with her in his arms. Konohana laughs, telling him that she is being abducted again. Tomonari tells her that being a kidnapper would be a bit of a stretch even for him. Tomonari asked her what her suggestion was, and Konohana responded that she should be the abductee instead, and would make Tomonari convince her father. Tomonari laughed, reminding her that she was using intimidation techniques. Tomonari let her know that her plan was not any good, that they needed to find a fundamental solution, so the only way was through Tomonari convincing him. Konohana asked if it was possible for him to convince her father, and Tomonari was confident that it would go to plan. But deep down he knew that he only wanted Konohana to feel relaxed, and for that purpose he was prepared to fight until the end. Konohana kneeled down in front of him, before they heard a familiar voice asking him where he was planning to go with Konohana. The voice belonged to Shizune, who arrived in the gardens with an army of servants. Tomonari and Konohana were completely surrounded, and it was then that Shizune ordered the guards to restrain Tomonari. The servants surrounded Tomonari, who knew that he needed to act quick. Before one could place his hand on him, Tomonari kicked the servant in his stomach, sweeping him off his feet. Tomonari made his way onto the second servant, who instantly attacked, managing to pin the second servant to the ground. Others ran to try and stop him, but Tomonari fought until he could no longer. He was completely outnumbered, of course, and it was not long until he was restrained. Shizune looked down at him to let him know how much he has developed under such a short period of time. She mentioned how it was clear that he picked up the skills fast and the results were better than what she expected. But Tomonari was not amused by her compliments. He asked her to move away if all she was planning to do was to compliment him. Shizune told him that it was not possible. Konohana called Shizune's name, promising her that from now on she would focus on her act and will be perfect everywhere she goes all the time. She pleads with the maid to let her stay with Tomonari, but Shizune was not budging and told Hinako sternly that it was not it. Konohana turned to Tomonari, who was still pinned in place by a servant. She looked down at him in sadness. Tomonari told Shizune that he never wanted to push Konohana too much, and that was why he wanted to be by her side. Shizune listened as Tomonari explained that even if everyone else is no good, only he wanted to be someone to be there for Konohana, and that was why he was begging her to not throw away the only thing he wanted to protect. Konohana collapsed in front of Tomonari, to tell him that from now on, she was his. They looked each other in the eyes, before Konohana tells Tomonari that she believes in him. They both lean into each other, overcome by the intimate moment. But Shizune interrupts. Firstly apologizing for ruining the exciting moment, she lets them know that they shouldn't worry, and things won't end the way they think they will. Tomonari turns to look at the maid in confusion. Shizune explained that Tomonari's achievements as a caretaker will be clearly presented to Kagen. He would just need to be patient and wait a little longer. Tomonari understood what Shizune was implying and accepted. Shizune whipped out her phone to tell him that he had good timing, and Tomonari asked her whose side she was really on. Shizune answered that although she was employed by Kagen, she was Konohana's ally. In the office, Kagen picked up a box filled with 4 envelopes. He asked Shizune what the envelopes were. Shizune approached his desk, explaining that the envelopes contained replies to invitations sponsored by the Konohana family. She told Kagen that she thought that he may want to read them sooner, so she ordered the main residence to deliver all that had arrived. Kagen asked Shizune to explain the 4 responses to him. Shizune began by reading the first, which came from Asahi Karen, the daughter of Jaizu Holdings. This group was one of the top 5 electronic retailers in Japan. The next came from Taishu Katsuya, the son of a major transportation company, one of the top companies in the industry. The next was from Miyakojima Norika, whose family run one of Japan's largest sporting goods manufacturers. And finally, was the famous Tenuji Mirai, daughter of the Tenuji Group. Although they have a competitive relationship with the Konohana Group, it would be important to make connections with them as a group of a similar size. Shizune advised Kagen that if he was to get into the Tenuji Group, he could surely make big profits. Shizune explained that all 4 students were schoolmates of his daughter, and although Kagen had never invited Asahi or Taishu until now, they are not bad business partners. And Miyakojima was acquainted with the director, but they never participated in social gatherings before. However, it turned out that the director of the Miyakojima group was interested in attending, as his daughter was. Shizune called the scenario to be a stroke of luck. Of course, Kagen was acquainted with the head of the Tenuji group, but it would be the first time that his daughter gets to participate. It turned out that the Tenuji group valued people over numbers, and up until then, the relationship had been superficial. But Kagen knew that this could be an opportunity to build a stronger relationship of trust. He saw it as an opportunity to outshine the other groups. Kagen looked down at the 4 invitations before asking if this was all his daughter's doing. He mentioned how he had not personally invited anyone until now, and did not realize that he would gain so many connections so suddenly. Shizune told him that although she was direct in saying this, if Kagen was happy about the change of Konohana, wouldn't it be bad to let go of the person responsible for it? Kagen looked down, knowing who Shizune was referring to. He told Shizune that although he was a partner, he had few relationships with the shipbuilding companies, and the 4 major companies could become important connections in the future. Shizune let him know that it would be obvious who they should give priority to, and it was then that Kagen ordered for Shizune to bring Tomonari back. A week passed, and it was time for the Konohana formal party. Guests arrived at the mansion dressed elegantly in floor-length gowns and tuxedos. Tomonari was back, dressed in his expensive suit. Shizune smiled and asked him how it felt. She let him know that this time he would be introduced as the heir of a medium-sized company. If he was not confident about his manners, he should at least try not to stand out. Tomonari turned to Shizune and looked her in the eyes. He thanked her for everything she had done, knowing that it was her who ultimately got him out of this mess. But Shizune disputed his words, telling Tomonari that although she helped in speaking to Kagen, it was Tomonari's work that made everything possible. Tomonari apologized for putting her in a situation where she needed to step up to Kagen. Shizune let Tomonari know that she needed to go back to work, but once he entered the venue, it may be a good idea to observe the people around him. Tomonari knew that the party would be a great opportunity to learn the ways of the upper class. Shizune walked away, aware of the fact that she needed to let Tomonari grow for the future. Tomonari smiled, pleased to know that Shizune was still interested in investing in his education. Tomonari wandered around the party, watching the guests conversate and enjoy their night. Although Tomonari was dressed to the nines in his expensive Italian suit, he still couldn't help but feel out of place as he stood amongst the guests. He heard his name from the crowd and turned around to see Asahi and Taishu. They complimented Tomonari on his tuxedo, who chuckled and told them he still needed to get used to it. Taishu smiled, telling him that since the party was hosted by the Konohanas themselves, it wouldn't hurt to be careful and embarrass yourself with a bad outfit. Asahi looked beautiful wearing an elegant dress. She playfully asks the boys if they have fallen in love with her. Taishu shrugs, joking that even the horse-drawn carriages have their own costumes. And it wasn't long before the two got distracted again, suggesting to move to another spot. Tomonari laughed, realizing that his friends were as noisy as ever. It wasn't long until Tomonari was joined again by Tenuji this time. She looked lovely too, attracting a crowd of curious onlookers who wondered which family the serious girl belonged to. Tanoiju mentioned that she thinks that being able to live freely in any environment may also be a talent. And shortly after Miyakojima arrived, her head bowed in embarrassment. She struggled to walk around in her dress and pleaded with Tomonari to help her. Tanuji scolded her, letting her know that if she kept going on like this, she would never be able to get ahead in the future. Miyakojima cried that it was only her nature that made her this way. Tanoji suggested trying a drastic measure for once. Tanoji let her know that there were many big names from all industries that they could network with, and to Miyakojima's horror, Tanuji dragged her away to speak with others. Tomonari looked around the crowd to see a familiar tall figure. It was Kagen. As expected, Kagen was mobbed by his guests who greeted him as he drifted through the crowd. Despite this, Tomonari caught Kagen's eye and he began to walk over to his employee. Tomonari was overshadowed by the president before politely greeting him. It was the first time they saw each other since Kagen dismissed Tomonari. Tomonari bowed, thanking him for his consideration. Kagen smiled warmly, telling Tomonari that he expected him to say at least one or two resentful things to him. Tomonari smiled. He knew that things turned out well for him at the end of the day, so there was no point in holding grudges. Kagen let Tomonari know that he thought of him as more of an impulsive person, but still tried his best to speak to him that day, and that showed to him that Tomonari could still use his head clearly. Kagen wandered outside to the balcony and Tomonari wondered if he wanted him to follow. He watched the president look over the balcony, which provided a view of the entire estate. Sensing Tomonari behind him, Kagen continued to say that Konohana was a genius. Tomonari agreed with him, telling him that Hinako had the best grades in the whole school after all. But Kagen let him know that he was not speaking about that kind of genius. Instead, Hinako had a natural talent when it came to work. In fact, she inherited the talent that befits the Konohana family lineage. And that was why the president wanted his daughter to take over the family business. And of course, officially, his son-in-law would take over. There was no reason not to utilize that talent. Kagen continued to explain that he planned for Konohana to get straight into work for the Konohana group once she graduates from the academy. Tomonari looked down. Although he understood Kagen's vision for his empire, did it really have to be Konohana who it all falls down to? Kagen started to chuckle, mentioning how if there was anyone who could replace him, he would gladly jump at the chance. But ultimately, the Konohana household was heavy. With the group holding approximately 800,000 employees, he could not pass the responsibility on to someone who was not competent. A single mistake could result in the loss of many employees. Kagen explained that sometimes you can be crushed by the pressure and lose loved ones. Tomonari saw him twist a ring around his finger as he spoke, and Tomonari wondered what Kagen thought about his daughter. Kagen answered that he prioritizes the household more than his own daughter, and from that moment on, both his parents and his son became nothing more than cogs in the Konohana machine to him. He added that he did as well. Tomonari was taken aback by Kagen's aloofness as he stared in wonder at the president. Kagen wandered off back into the dazzling crowd of the party, leaving Tomonari alone on the balcony. He seized the moment as an opportunity to take a breath, before he was joined by Konohana. She wandered over, calling Itsuki's name. Tomonari turned around to meet with her eyes. He asked Konohana what she was doing there. Konohana mentioned how her dad told her that Tomonari was outside, so she wanted to join him. Tomonari smiled as Konohana thanked him for continuing to be her caretaker. She told him that his words made her happy, and she would continue to believe in him. Tomonari looked down to Konohana, who moved closer to him. He admired her cute little face before snapping back to reality. Tomonari thought how he knew that Konohana did not see him as a man, so there was no reason for him to get any thought in his head. Konohana noticed him looking away, causing her to ask if he was alright. Tomonari lied that he was fine. Tomonari knew that if he wanted to meet her expectations, he shouldn't be looking at her longer than necessary. Konohana breathed out, explaining that she was exhausted from greeting everyone at the party. She asked Tomonari to pat her head to ease her. He reached down, knowing that what Konohana really wanted was that sense of family. He caressed her head before Konohana suddenly moved back. Tomonari asked her what was wrong as Konohana's eyes widened. She struggled to speak and her face turned red. Tomonari told her that if she wasn't feeling well, she should take a break and rest. But Konohana abruptly turned around and walked away, leaving Tomonari by himself outside. What caused this sudden change in behavior? Tomonari dreaded to think that he was being avoided. Back in the crowd of the party, Konohana struggled to pull herself together. She held onto her cheeks, knowing that something was really wrong with her. Tomonari woke up the next morning with his head filled with thoughts. He rose from his bed knowing that at least he is still Hinako's caretaker. He swore that he would try to do his best today. He carried out his first duty, which was waking Konohana up. He arrived in her room and told her it was time to wake up. Konohana was curled up in bed before she mumbled his name sleepily. She told him that she did not want to go to school today. Tomonari playfully scolded her to not say such selfish things, secretly hoping that one day the girl will be capable of getting herself out of bed. But deep down, he knew that she was the reason why he was still here. And he should not forget that he was nearly fired almost a week ago. Tomonari leaned in to wipe Konohana's face. She bluntly asked him what he was doing, to which Tomonari explained that he was only trying to wipe her drool. Konohana threw her bedsheet over her head before telling Tomonari that she can't wipe it herself and he should not look at her right now. Tomonari leaned back confused. What was with her sudden change of character? Things went from bad to worse when Konohana then ordered Tomonari out of her room. Tomonari did as he was told, scuttling out and closing the door behind him. Konohana had been acting strange since the social event, and her attitude towards Tomonari was visibly different. Tomonari turned away, wondering if she would return to normal after a while. A few moments passed and Tomonari called to see if Hinako was doing alright. She emerged from her room looking tired and disheveled. Shizune instantly asked if something happened to Konohana. She explained that Konohana said that she does not want to be woken up by Tomonari anymore. Shizune asked Tomonari for an explanation as to why Hinako was like this all of a sudden, beginning to comment on her condition after the social event, but eventually falling silent. Tomonari asked if he did anything to make Konohana dislike him, but Shizune told him that wasn't true. Instead, she let him know that the incident from the other day made her realize how fond Konohana was of Tomonari. Shizune then reassured him that Konohana was not physically unwell, so it would be best for him to just keep an eye on her. And of course, if he was to find out any further information, he should let her know immediately. So Tomonari continued with his tasks as usual. He pleasantly wished her a good morning the next day, but this time they met in the hallway. Konohana wished him a good morning back, before they made their way to the classroom. In school, Konohana was as pleasant as ever, greeting all of her schoolmates warmly. Tomonari thought of how much of a drag the new routine was, with them coming together every morning before having to split up and meet once again. He heard other students notice the distance between him and Konohana, as they whispered, wondering what had happened. Konohana turned to him, requesting for them to walk outside together. Tomonari wondered if he should try asking Shizune. Asahi and Tisho greeted Tomonari, letting him know that the midterm results were out. They gathered round to look at the results board, and as usual, Konohana was first place again. Asahi turned to Konohana to congratulate her, commenting how she was expecting nothing less anyway. Konohana warmly thanked her, and it wasn't long until Konohana was mobbed by the students who all congratulated her on her amazing results. Tomonari gazed at the board, knowing his name would not be listed. It only mentioned the top 50 students after all. He noticed that Taisho's name wasn't there either, but Taisho defended that he was only checking out the board to see how everyone else was doing. Tomonari looked over to Konohana, knowing that she really was outstanding in terms of her academic abilities. He let his thoughts get the better of him until he was joined by Konohana herself, who commented that he was probably thinking about something rude. Tomonari was flustered, wondering how she could read him that well. Another student grabbed Konohana only to waffle that he was thinking about Konohana's economic report from the other day, and how he thought that it was good. Konohana smiled, thanking him. Tomonari watched Konohana walk away, before he was joined by Tenuji. Tomonari congratulated her on coming second place on the board, but Tenuji's smile instantly dropped at his comment. She told him that she could only be happy when her name shows her to be first place on the board. She did mention, however, that her results this time were meaningful. She explained that she finally saw her chance of winning. She asked Tomonari what place he got, to which he responded that he believes that he was below average, so as a result was not mentioned on the board. Tenuji was annoyed that Tomonari did below average even though he received guidance from her. Tomonari waffled that the tutoring that she gave him was really helpful, but Tenuji remained annoyed. She scolded him, saying that he was still clueless as ever, and that no matter how serious he was, if his goals were low, he won't grow at all. She finished her list of insults by calling him a hunchback, before mentioning that he seems like the type of person who easily shows his emotions in his behavior. Tenuji advised Tomonari that if he had more confidence, he would be able to stand out more. Tenuji turned to Tomonari and asked him if he would like to spend some time with her after school. Tomonari looked over to Konohana, who was smiling and chattering away with other students. It looked like she was doing just fine. Tenuji frowned, waiting for Tomonari's response. She explained that the study session, arranged by Tomonari, was her first opportunity to teach someone. But it turns out that by her teaching others, it helped her understand topics even better, leading to her impressive results this year. She explained that by teaching him, she also benefited. In other words, Tenuji wanted to continue with the study sessions in the future, because Tomonari has the lowest grades among the people closest to her. Tomonari waffled that he wished he had a way to repay her, but Tenuji warned that it would only cause him trouble. Tomonari smiled, letting her know that if she was able to continue to teach him, it would be appreciated. Tenoiju asked him if there was anything particular that he wasn't good at, where they could begin. But Tomonari knew there were a number of areas where he struggled. Tenuji smiled as Tomonari suggested that maybe they could start with manners. She let him know that manners were her speciality, with the Tenuji family valuing manners highly. Tomonari warned that he would be happy for Tenuji to teach him some manners, but due to family circumstances, he was not in control of his own schedule. Tenuji told him that she understood, but did comment on how it seems like he comes from a difficult household. Tomonari sighed. Although he was gradually getting used to the Konohana ways, he would be lying if he didn't say that he felt out of place. Tenuji turned to Tomonari to ask him if he behaved the same way at home. Taken aback by her question, Tomonari asked if she meant to ask if he was the same at home compared to right now. Tenuji commented on how Tomonari's demeanor appeared timid and without a trace of confidence. She continued to say that there was a reason why she invited him, and it was about Tomonari's behavior at the academy. She straight up asked Tomonari if he feels inferior when he is around other people at the academy. Tomonari gulped at her question, and Teji mentioned how it was crazy that he got to attend the academy thanks to the influence of the Konohana family. Tomonari thought that he was inferior in terms of intelligence, family background, and everything else. Normally, he does not really mind it because of how everyone else behaves, but it may be true that he has some complexes. Tenwaji responded that it was not uncommon for students at the Kyu Academy to suffer from such complexes, but fortunately for Tomonari, he has a positive attitude, and if he was to accept her guidance, he would be able to completely overcome his challenges. Tomonari listened to Tenuji promise him that she could help him in reaching his full potential. Tomonari was not shaken by Tenuji's eagerness, but instead, her ability to see right through him. Everything he worked so hard to conceal had not fooled Tenuji one bit. Tenuji broke the growing silence by asking Tomonari to let her know as soon as possible if he was in or not. She really did have a good eye for people, Tomonari thought. He told her that he thought it was possible to read someone as well as she read him. Tenuji told him to save his flattery and it wasn't a big deal, but Tomonari truly was amazed by her. Back at the Konohana mansion after school, Tomonari told Shizune about Tenuji's proposal and how she was willing to coach him. Shizune asked Tomonari what he wanted to do, to which he responded that he wanted to accept the offer. He knew that he was lucky to have Tenuji coach him. She was a great teacher and very reliable in many ways. Not to mention the words she said about his insecurities. Tomonari would be lying if he did not say that it resonated with him. He didn't realize until recently, but he truly did have a lot of respect for Tenuji. She was always so dignified and really deserved to be at the Kyu Academy. Tomonari explained to Shizune that if he were to receive guidance from Tenuji, he would be more worthy of Hinako. He continued to say that he wanted to be able to be there for her whenever she needs a break, and to be able to support her perfectly in times of need. Shizune was impressed by his words and admitted that Tenuji would probably be able to teach him manners better than she could. Shizune told Tomonari that she also has a message for him, from Kagen. It turns out that Kagen had the expectation that Tomonari would begin to take initiative in building connections for the Konohana family in place of Konohana. Shizune let him know to be conscious of it, just as he did when he invited his friends to the social gathering, to ensure Konohana's honor is maintained. Tomonari was surprised by Kagen's message, particularly since he believed that Kagen did not have much faith in him. He understood that from now on, it would be okay for him to freely build connections as long as it was with fellow Kyu Academy students. In the end, if those connections get tied to Hinako, then it would be a good thing. Then out of nowhere, Konohana appeared, calling Tomonari's name. She peeked out from behind the door, asking if they were going to take a bath. Tomonari apologized and explained that he was talking to Shizune, raising Konohana's curiosity even more. Tomonari explained that he was going to tell Konohana later, but ultimately he would not be able to go home with her for quite a while. He asked Konohana if she was okay with the new arrangements. Konohana was shocked by what Tomonari was saying, but he admitted that the new plan was on the back of Kagen's new expectations. After all, there was still a lot to learn. Tomonari wanted to improve his grades at school and learn manners so he would be able to exist in high society, and in order to do that he needed to use his after-school time for a while. Konohana asked if that meant that Tomonari needed to learn this from someone outside, or if herself or Shizune could help. Shizune explained that she had a lot more on her plate after the recent social event, and there were also things that Konohana needed to do too, not to mention that it would be beneficial for Tomonari to learn from others from time to time. Konohana went silent before asking if all of this was for her own sake. Tomonari looked into her eyes, explaining that all of this was to ensure he could take better care of her. Konohana looked down, explaining that she will forgive him if it can't be helped, but she did ask who was going to be the one to teach him. Tomonari responded that it will be Tenuji who he will be spending some time with. Konohana had disbelief plastered all over her face at this news, and it wasn't long until she collapsed to the ground. The others called after her to make sure she was okay. Dressed in a full swimsuit, Konohana relaxed in the bath, licking on a stick of ice cream. Tomonari, as always trying hard not to look too much, came to help her wash herself. It was pretty hard to get past Shizune's eyes. He knew that if Konohana did not like the idea, he could always just refuse it. Konohana admitted that she really did not like the idea of Tenuji teaching him, but she will forgive him if it's for her sake. She didn't want to hold him back or get in his way. Tomonari told Konohana that he was a bit relieved. He thought that she had been avoiding him lately and her behavior seemed quite strange. He asked her why she told him to stop waking her in the morning, and other occasions where she didn't let him carry her. Konohana explained that she did not want to distance herself before she fell silent. She told him that she didn't want to say it. Tomonari thought to himself that since he became Konohana's caretaker, he thought he was starting to understand her thinking. He looked at her outfit and told her that she usually wears a bikini. Konohana explained that she just felt like something different today. Konohana insisted for Tomonari to not wash her hair, but Tomonari helped her with it anyway. He noticed that her ears were completely red. Konohana turned to him to tell him that he should not do this type of thing with Tenuji. Tomonari was stunned at Konohana's thought. It had already taken him ages to get used to bathing with Konohana, let alone another girl. He continued to rinse out her hair before noticing new strands were trapped under her strap. He asked her to wait a moment before moving her strap to take out her hair. Konohana freaked out as he did this, eventually jumping up. She seemed completely flustered. Tomonari apologized for disturbing her, but it was hard to believe that this behavior was coming from a girl who once took her whole swimsuit off. The next day, it was time for Tomonari's session with Tenuji. He asked her to go easy on him, but Tenuji swore to teach him strictly and thoroughly. She had a naughty look on her face, with her only objective being to defeat Konohana. She told Tomonari that the first task should be to set a goal, informing him that she planned for his name to make the top 50 list at school, despite there being only 1 month left until the practical exam. Tomonari was shocked at her suggestion. He really had to make it to the top 50? Tomonari explained to Tenuji that he thought making it to the top 50 would be an unrealistic goal, since he was currently below average in school. But Tenuji was steadfast. She promised to teach him thoroughly and carefully, and that he had nothing to worry about. Tomonari noticed how serious Tenuji's eyes were, and knew the only thing he could commit to was to make an effort and trust her. Tenuji brought up how Tomonari wanted to learn manners, and asked him if there was any specific reason behind that. Tomonari admitted that during the last social event, he became aware that he still struggled to carry himself naturally, so he wanted to at least learn to behave in a way that won't embarrass himself. Tenuji approved of his mindset and reassured him that she will teach him manners suitable for high society. She thought that it would be a good idea to teach him table manners, speaking skills, and dancing. Tomonari stuttered at the mention of dancing, admitting that he could only dance Sorenbushi style. When he realized that Tenuji did not know what this meant, he just told her that he couldn't dance at all, in fact. Tenuji thought that it would be a good starting point for Tomonari to learn the basics of dancing. She made a plan for him to study until 6 p.m. and then she would give him a lesson in manners. She reassured that she would stay with him. The study session began, and Tenuji was very hands-on with helping Tomonari learn. Tomonari found the session really helpful, although Shizune's lessons were easy to understand. Since Tenuji was also a Kyo Academy student, her teaching style was more evolved around him improving his grades. It was also noticeable that Tenuji may achieve better results than ever at this pace. Tomonari asked Tenuji what she thought about the study session and if she found it useful. She admitted that she believes it is and that she has a fondness of teaching others. Tomonari then pushed his luck, curiously asking why she had such a strong sense of rivalry towards Konohana. Tenuji told him that there was no specific reason or instance why she was like that, but it was mainly because as the daughter of the Tenuji family, she could not afford to fall behind other students. Tomonari asked if it was like a family tradition, but Tenuji disagreed. She admitted that it was more of a rule that she made up for herself. She continued to say that the school, in a way, was a reflection of society, and she believed that the Tenuji group was the best corporate group in Japan. She told him that as someone in her position, any defeat would be a betrayal of her convictions. She thought that it was a noble and proud way of thinking. Tomonari thought to himself that if anyone from his old school spoke like that, they would have been mocked. But he understood that things were different here, and it was precisely because Tenuji usually acts with sincerity that her words carry a sense of realism. And to Tomonari, Tenuji's words seemed genuine. He asked her if this way of life was painful, to which she disagreed. Being the daughter of the Tenuji household is her purpose, and she wanted to honor it. That is what brings her happiness. Tomonari accepted her philosophy before she suggested they move on to the etiquette lesson. Tomonari brought up that he did have one request when it came to etiquette. Back in the Konohana mansion, Shizune's phone flashed alive. She wondered what was the matter before picking it up. Tomonari let her know that Tenuji was now helping him with table manners, so he would be dining with her tonight. Shizune told him that she understood and saw no issue with the request, but was cut short as Konohana tugged on her dress. Shizune handed the phone over to Konohana, who asked if he was coming home late today. She asked if he could come home as soon as he could. Konohana collapsed onto her bed in sadness as she passed Shizune the phone back. Tomonari returned to Tanuji, apologizing for the holdup. Tanuji smiled at the dinner table, which was now set. She told him how authentic the whole thing felt. He asked her if the arrangement was really okay, watching plates of food get laid out in front of him. Tanuji reassured him that she was making the most of her time in her own way, so there was no need for any concern. She actually mentioned how Tomonari reminded her of how she used to be, which was the reason why she was so interested in taking him under her wing. Tomonari asked her what she meant by that, but Tanuji suggested starting the lesson instead. Tomonari arrived back at the Konohana mansion late at night. Shizune met him at the entrance and thanked him for his hard work. She asked him about his time with Tanuji and what he learned, commenting on how it seemed like he had been receiving some very thorough training from her. She asked if he prioritized learning more about table manners, but he disagreed. Shizune thanked him for not forgetting his role as a caretaker, which Tomonari agreed that he is initially here for. As they walked, Shizune gave Tomonari the heads up that Konohana was waiting for him. Tomonari asked if they were supposed to do their scheduled self-defense lesson, but Shizune mentioned how she was going to deprioritize it considering what lies ahead. The dojo's often crowded these days, probably because he kept thrashing the guards. Tomonari apologized, realizing she was referring to the incident from the other week, but Shizune reassured him it was more of a lesson for them than for him. She let him know that if he was aiming to be the Konohana family's bodyguard, she could be happy to begin his training immediately. But Tomonari reassured her that he had no plans for that right now. Shizune instructed him to change his clothes and he will take his bag, but on the way he bumped into Konohana, who greeted him home. In his room, Tomonari stretched out in exhaustion. He looked down at his schoolwork before thinking that at times like this, it's time to take another step forward. He felt like the old him used to go to school for no reason, not for anyone else or even himself, but now he was going by his own will, becoming a hard worker. His mind couldn't help but wonder what his old friends were up to, though. Maybe he will find out once everything settles. Konohana walked into Tomonari's room, much to his surprise. She told him that his room was farther than she had expected, and it took her a whole 30 minutes to get there. She asked what he was doing, and he told her he was just preparing for tomorrow's lesson. He explained that Tanuji had been teaching him a lot, but since that was only for the exams, he needed to make sure he could keep up with the regular lessons too. He looked at Konohana and asked if there was something she needed. She replied that there was nothing in particular, she just wanted to come and see him. Tomonari told her he didn't mean it that way, but he was shocked when she announced that she would sleep in his room tonight. She complained about how far the dining room was from her own room, saying mornings were a pain, and added that she didn't want to go back to her room anyway. Tomonari knew he couldn't argue with her, especially when she asked him to come over and pet her head. He turned to her and asked if she would really be okay with that. She hadn't seemed very open to him being touchy with her lately. Konohana admitted that it wasn't like she hated it or anything, she had just been acting weird recently. Tomonari asked if she meant she wasn't feeling well as he reached out his hand to touch her forehead. Konohana's eyes widened, but she sighed in relief. Tomonari kept his hand there as she closed her eyes. He was exhausted, but now he needed to carry Konohana back to her room. A moment passed, and Tomonari fell asleep. This time, it was Konohana who woke up first. She looked at him, realizing it was her first time seeing him asleep. He must have been exhausted. She gently got up from the bed and took the opportunity to look around his room. She saw his books and a note listing all of her favorite ice cream flavors. The door opened and Konohana turned to see Shizune, who told her the door had been opened so she came in. Konohana shushed her and gestured toward the sleeping Tomonari. Shizune sighed and asked Konohana if she would like to be walked back to her room. Once Shizune and Konohana reached her bedroom, Konohana admitted that she felt conflicted. Even though she was grateful that Itsuki was taking care of her, sometimes the thought of relying on him unsettled her. Shizune looked at her and asked if she was unhappy about Tomonari being her attendant. Konohana admitted it wasn't that she was unhappy, but she didn't want him to be just that. Did Tomonari only do what she said because it was his duty? Shizune told Konohana to relax, saying that Tomonari was by her side for more than just work-related reasons. Konohana couldn't believe it, but Shizune continued, saying she believed Konohana would come to understand if she was willing to wait a little longer. Konohana looked down, wondering if that was still true. Shizune told her it was something she should be able to figure out easily. She smiled at Konohana, noticing it was the first time they were truly having a heart-to-heart. Shizune had not expected to feel like a mother. At school the next day, Tomonari was greeted by his group who had found out about his lessons with Tanuji. He explained that there was nothing suspicious going on. Tanuji had just been teaching him manners and other things. It was like an extension of the study sessions they'd done before. Tanuji walked through the door a few moments later, gesturing for Tomonari. Asahi whispered that there was definitely something going on between them. In the privacy of the hallway, Tomonari asked Tanuji if everything was alright. Tanuji told him that the cafe they were supposed to use was closed that day, so they needed to find another place. She proposed that they just have the session at her house again. She said it was important for Tomonari to stay focused and disciplined, and sometimes familiarity with the setting could help ease nerves. Still, that calmness shouldn't be mistaken for having mastered proper manners. She added that switching things up now and then was good to prevent him from growing too used to one environment. Tomonari told Konohana, and she asked if that meant Tanuji wanted him to sleep over. She looked down, seemingly disheartened by the idea of Tanuji wanting her caretaker again. But to her relief, Tomonari told her he wasn't planning to stay over. Konohana asked if he enjoyed studying with Tanuji-san, and Tomonari said he did. Tanuji wasn't the type to cut corners, even with people she knew. Her approach helped him stay focused, even without realizing it. She looked him in the eyes and reminded him that he was her caretaker. Tomonari told her he understood, so she should stop putting foods she hated into his lunch. Konohana giggled, admitting that she had been found out. Tomonari arrived at Tanuji's house where he was warmly welcomed inside. The Tanuji estate was grand and beautiful. It was much flashier compared to the Konohana estate. Tanuji curiously asked Tomonari if he had ever been to the Konohana estate before, and he hesitantly replied that he had only been there a few times because of his parents. Tanuji told him that her family's principle was to shine brightly and walk with dignity. She began by showing Tomonari around the garden, which was designed so that its beauty could be appreciated even from beyond the gates. Tomonari would be lying if he said it wasn't beautiful. The pair wandered toward the house and saw a man dressed in an expensive-looking suit. He smiled when he saw Tanuji, who greeted him as her father. Tomonari was stunned to meet Tanuji's father so soon, but she mentioned that her father had wanted to meet him. Tomonari bowed and said it was nice to meet him. He added how much he appreciated Tanuji for supporting him. Tanuji's father smiled and introduced himself as Tanuji Masatsugu. He told Tomonari to make himself comfortable in their home, but Tanuji quickly reminded her father that Tomonari was there for a study session, not to relax. Her father laughed, telling them to study until your hearts are content. Before leaving, he pulled Tomonari aside and asked what kind of relationship he had with Tanuji. Tomonari replied that they just went to the same school and that was all. Masatsugu asked if that was really it or if they were more like boyfriend and girlfriend. Tanuji overheard and told her father that she and Tomonari had no such relationship. Her father stuttered, and knowing that his daughter had confirmed it, he accepted the answer. Tomonari hadn't expected Tanuji's father to be so playful and humorous. Then again, even Kagen had seemed kind and caring toward his daughter at first. Masatsugu brought up that he had heard they were going to practice table manners, and Tomonari said he was hoping to learn more about British etiquette. Masatsugu announced that since it was a special occasion, he would join them. Tanuji was pleased to hear that practical experience was more effective than practice alone. The three sat at the dining table and began with their empty plates and cutlery. Tomonari practiced using his napkin and placing his tableware accordingly. Masatsugu was full of compliments, saying Tomonari was much more composed than he had expected. Tomonari thanked him and mentioned how comfortable he felt dining with him and Tanuji. However, Tanuji had a different opinion. She said Tomonari still needed to work on a few things and came across as clumsy when sipping soup. Masatsugu laughed, saying it was only natural for Tomonari to be a little nervous with him sitting there too. Tomonari thought to himself that this could be a great opportunity to gain insights from someone in the upper class. He wondered if there was a way to stop getting nervous in situations like this. Masatsugu flipped the question and asked if Tomonari thought anyone doesn't get nervous at times like this. He asked if Tomonari said that because he came across as someone who never gets nervous. Tomonari stuttered, saying he didn't mean it like that, but then admitted that maybe he did mean it a little. Masatsugu burst out laughing and praised Tomonari for being honest. He admitted that it was true. He rarely got nervous and could maintain a light attitude with anyone. Not even the Prime Minister could shake him. However, that was only because of his current circumstances. No one starts out with that kind of composure. He had gone through many hardships when he was young. It was only after years of effort and accomplishments that he became the person he was today. Masatsugu gave some valuable advice: prove yourself through results and act first without making excuses. Even if you fail, it doesn't matter. It's your past deeds that hold you up. Masatsugu asked Tomonari if he had something he had accomplished with unwavering conviction. Tomonari said yes. Masatsugu told him that this experience would become his core, and that he should keep building more like it. Tomonari sipped his tea, impressed by the advice he had received from Masatsugu. He didn't exude a dignified presence, not because he was incapable of it, but because he simply had no need to. Masatsugu trusted that he didn't have to put on an act since people wouldn't disrespect him regardless. It wasn't that he expected sincerity from others, it was because he had fought so hard all this time that sincerity was the only way people could respond to him. It was amazing how he could accept and affirm his past self like that. A heavy rumble was followed by rain. Tomonari hardly noticed how the weather had changed. Masatsugu checked his phone and announced that a heavy rain warning had been issued. He told Tomonari that it might be best for him to spend the night. Tomonari asked if that was really okay, but Tanuji insisted that it would be much worse to send a guest out in such conditions. Tomonari stood up and said he needed to ask for permission first. He phoned Shizune, who was already aware of the bad weather. She told Tomonari it was fine, though she mentioned that Konohana would be upset. Tomonari said he wasn't sure if this would make Konohana happy, but maybe it would help if Shizune told her that Tanuji's father had given him a stamp of approval on his table manners today. He apologized for making her wait, but Shizune was glad he was making progress. When he got off the call, Masatsugu and Tanuji were waiting to show him to his room for the night. As expected, it was just as grand and elegant as the rest of the house. Tanuji told him there was a change of clothes in the closet and that he was free to use the communal bath. Tomonari was stunned to hear the words communal bath and asked Tanuji if it was really appropriate for him to use it. Tanuji smiled and said it was the most beautiful bathroom in the house. She left him to it, telling him to feel free to speak to any of the servants if he needed anything. She closed the door, leaving Tomonari alone in his suite. He guessed this counted as him spending the night at another girl's place. A lot of things hadn't gone according to plan today, but at least it had been a valuable learning experience. Not to mention, there would probably be many more times where he was invited to other people's homes as Konohana's caretaker. Tomonari grabbed his clothes and made his way to the communal bath. It was stunning, as expected, and he was incredibly relieved when the hot water hit his body. Having a bath like this all to himself was quite nice. He looked into the distance and saw a figure. He immediately jumped out of his skin. Was that Tanuji? The figure answered that she was Tanuji, but maybe not the one he was familiar with. She came closer, and Tomonari saw a woman. She introduced herself as Hanami, Mirei's mother. She thanked him for being so kind to Tanuji and said she had heard how dedicated he was to his studies. Tomonari smiled and told her that he should be the one thanking her. Tanuji had been incredibly supportive of him. But then he stuttered as he asked if he was in the right bathroom. Hanami told him they should use the opportunity to bathe together, and Tomonari wondered how she could be so calm. Just then he heard his name being called by another voice. This time it was Tanuji. He was saved. Tanuji asked her mother what she was doing there, and her mother apologized, saying it was her mistake. Tanuji scolded her and told her to leave, saying she really didn't want her indecent mother around her male classmate. Her mother chuckled and told Tanuji she was right. Then she turned to Tomonari and asked if it would be better if her daughter joined them too, before complimenting Tomonari's physique. Her mother's words were enough to make Tanuji march over, enraged. With a towel wrapped around her body, she ordered her mother to leave immediately. They bickered as Hanami got out of the water. She wasn't nude at all, but was fully covered in a strapless bikini. She told her daughter that she should be the one to show more modesty, pointing out that Tanuji looked like she had seen a ghost. Tanuji's towel had slipped slightly, revealing her skin. She made a quick U-turn and hurried away, leaving Tomonari alone with Hanami again. Hanami turned to him and said she wondered if her daughter was enjoying school. Tomonari reassured her, saying Tanuji was confident and that he was sure she was doing just fine there. Once he was back in his room, Tomonari received an unexpected guest knocking at his door. Tanuji had prepared some tea and asked if he was happy for her to join him. To her surprise, he was in the middle of studying. Tomonari admitted that he felt uneasy when he wasn't studying. Tanuji reassured him, saying the only reason he wasn't feeling confident yet was because he had never seen results that truly satisfied him. For the upcoming practical exam, he needed to place near the top. Tomonari looked down and told Tanuji he would do his best. As he looked at her, he noticed she looked different. Tanuji explained that it was rare for her to have her hair down at the academy. Tomonari thought it made her look more mature than usual. He was so intrigued that he didn't notice he had been staring. Tanuji grinned and asked if he was captivated by her. Tomonari stuttered that he just wasn't used to situations like this, but to his surprise, Tanuji told him she felt the same. She had never had a boy over before, and she was really humiliated about what happened in the bath. There was an awkward silence and Tomonari had no words. He picked up his tea and took a gulp, only to spit it out instantly. It was boiling hot. Tanuji asked if he was alright, and he sighed before laughing. Tanuji laughed too, then told Tomonari that she felt like he had been throwing her off from the very beginning, especially when he mentioned knowing the Konohana group but not the Tanuji group and saying ridiculous things like how she dyed her hair. Tomonari smirked, telling her he was still curious about that part. Tanuji told him one thing: he had her gratitude. After meeting him, her time at the academy had really improved, especially socially. And Tomonari had a lot of grit and motivation, which was contagious even for her. She challenged him to place within the top 10, promising that if he did, she would personally recruit him as her right-hand man. Tomonari looked down and told her it probably wasn't going to happen. Tanuji told him not to be so pessimistic, especially not at this stage. Tomonari said that working with her would be nice too, as memories of Tanuji flashed through his mind. Tomonari said that he thought working with Tanuji would be nice too, but she did not like the sound of that. They sat together on the couch and she asked if that was so. Tomonari said yes, and that these days he had been learning happily in the Tanuji style thanks to her. He hoped he could approach his work like this in the future too. Konohana quickly looked up, telling him he was right. She said if he chose to follow her, she would promise him a fulfilling life. Realistically, for him to work under her, he would have to pass the Tanuji group's employment exam. But if he could get a recommendation from the Kyu Academy, or better yet if he became her fiancé, the position of secretary would be guaranteed. Tomonari choked. Did she just say fiancé? She quickly stuttered, telling him not to worry about that stuff and that she was thinking too far ahead. She looked down as she said she might have stayed longer than she intended, so she would excuse herself now. But to wrap things up, they should decide on a slogan. Since ancient times, soldiers would shout battle cries to raise their spirits. Phrases such as "the enemy is at Hanuji." She asked him to repeat after her. "Konohana Hinako." She asked if anything was wrong, and Tomonari asked if they were really going to use that as their slogan. Konohana agreed. She told him it suited them perfectly. But Tomonari knew that if people found out about this, he would probably get fired. So he repeated "overthrow Hinako." She asked him to say it louder, so he did, mentally apologizing to Konohana. Tanuji told him to come back again sometime and that she would be waiting. Tomonari agreed and got into the car, telling the driver they would be going back now. But then Tomonari noticed something. Shizune was not in the car. He thought it made sense. They might recognize her as one of the Konohana household maids after all. Still, he wondered if Hinako was alright. Even so, he felt it had been a day well spent. Meanwhile, Tanuji was asked if she was on good terms with Tomonari. She said that was right. Though they were in different classes, they still interacted quite a lot. The Tanuji family held great influence, so she was pretty much respected at the academy, but she seldom got the chance to share friendly conversations side by side. The one who brought change to that situation was Tomonari. Even the recent study groups had begun thanks to him. Through those study sessions, her grades improved and she was able to make good friends. It also gave her the opportunity to interact with Hinako, someone she viewed as a rival yet wished to befriend. She was really glad about what Tomonari had said last night, how he thought it would be nice working with her. Though she always came across as confident, that did not mean she was not anxious about her future. Her competitiveness with Hinako stemmed from the fear that losing to her now might mean losing forever. That was why she never thought he would say something that would make her so happy. Even as she kept a firm and dignified front, Itsuji uncovered and soothed the worries she buried deep inside. She thought she could handle her job if Tomonari was by her side. Her father suddenly asked if she was talking about a relationship between a woman and a man. Tenuji went red, telling him it was not that type of relationship. Her father said he was glad to hear that, but there was something he wanted to discuss with her. He said it might be about time to arrange a fiancé for her. Tenuji stopped dead in her tracks. A fiancé? Her father continued, saying that he thought it was too early to tell her, but the other day he had a chance to speak with the head of the Konohana family at a social gathering. It seemed that he was actively considering an engagement for Konohana, supposedly to ward off any bad influences or admirers. Moving forward, many people would approach Tanuji hoping to benefit from their family's influence. Of course, among them would be those with ill intent. From his perspective, it might be too soon, but if Tanuji was ready, he saw no issue. As the heiress of the group, Tanuji understood that this day would eventually come. She had simply thought it would be a little later. What truly mattered was not the timing, but what would serve the interests of her family and what would be of benefit. So Tanuji asked her father if this would be the best course of action. Her father said it would at least make putting everything together easier. Tanuji smiled and accepted her father's idea. Tomonari returned to the Konohana estate to be met with Shizune. He apologized for having to stay overnight all of a sudden, but Shizune told him that was not a problem. The present issue took priority over past concerns, and Oju-sama's mood had been remedied at once. She told him that Konohana had been upset. Tomonari hovered outside Konohana's room, asking if it would be okay to enter. When he did, Konohana was wrapped up in her blanket. She bluntly welcomed him back, but then called him a liar for saying that he would be back within a few hours. Tomonari explained that something unexpected had happened. He had planned on coming back the same day, but the weather suddenly took a turn and there was lightning. He asked Konohana if she understood, but she congratulated him on coming up with such a long excuse and told him to come closer. She then pushed him onto the bed, and Tomonari went red. She sniffed his shirt, concluding that he did not smell like himself. She then asked him if he ate with Tanuji, and Tomonari pleaded with her to calm down. She then asked if he took a bath with her, and Tomonari blurted out that they did not as Konohana death stared him. She began to sob, telling Tomonari that he promised he would not. But he had dinner and even took a bath with Tanuji. He practically did the same things with her last night that he usually did with Konohana. She closed her eyes, asking if Tomonari had become Tanuji's caretaker. But Tomonari grabbed hold of Konohana's shoulders and looked into her eyes. He told her straight that she was wrong. He was her caretaker. Konohana's eyes widened. She seemed to understand. She told him that if that was the case, then Tomonari should be by her side more than anyone. Tomonari listened to what she had to say. He realized that he may have made her anxious. Did she think that he would leave her to work under another girl? He knew that could never happen. So he told Konohana not to worry, that he understood where she was coming from. But Konohana told him she only said it because she thought he did not understand. Then Shizune entered. She told Konohana that the preparations for lunch had been completed. Tomonari smiled, telling Konohana he understood. He held out his hand and Konohana took it as he asked if he could go first. Shizune told Konohana that Tomonari would also be dining with her today. Since he was not allowed to eat with her before learning table manners, he had Tenuji teach him. Shizune added that as Tomonari had earned a passing mark from Tenuji, she would make the final inspection. If everything checked out, there would be no issues with him joining for both lunch and dinner from now on. Tomonari remembered what he had to do, how to handle his napkin and fold it carefully. How on the right side there were 2 knives and 2 spoons. On the left side there were 3 forks arranged for appetizer, soup and meat in that order. If there was no fork on the right, then the menu did not include pasta. He needed to use the cutlery from the outside inward, and scoop the soup using a spoon. Tomonari did his best to follow all the rules, and Konohana looked at him like she had never seen anything like it. He wondered if this meant that he had passed. She told him that he had really improved a lot. Tomonari said yes, he did his best after all. Masatsugu-san said he did not feel any discomfort eating with him. In other words, by that point he had acquired the bare minimum knowledge. Still, he had been anxious and jumpy the whole time because he lacked confidence. The final step to mastering proper manners was confidence. So he said that from now on he wanted to make an effort for them to have meals together. Konohana placed her hands over her mouth. Taken aback by Tomonari's new demeanor, she smiled and said sure. He could not help but let out a big smile. Then Konohana said that from here on Izuki would also be on break. She asked him to feed her, and Tomonari turned to Shizune and asked if he still had to follow dining etiquette. But Shizune told him that such a rule did not exist. That being said, Keigan-sama might show up at this cafeteria, and if his etiquette was not up to par, it could create a negative impression. Shizune turned to Konohana, telling her she had brought her dessert. Tomonari wondered if she was being considerate so that he would not leave a bad impression. He held out the spoon, and Konohana took a bite. She told him it was delicious. Tomonari thought of Hinako's gentle, unguarded smile. It was thanks to Tenuji-san that he was able to see this expression. So when tomorrow came, he would make sure to thank her. Early the next morning, Tomonari hung up his sheets. He noticed how great the weather had been getting. Konohana woke up as exhausted as ever. She wished Tomonari good morning. Tomonari asked her if she was going to eat breakfast and she said that Shizune walked her partway here. She said it would be nice if they could eat breakfast together as well though. Tomonari said that he had all sorts of things to take care of in the morning like cleaning and laundry. But come to think of it, why did Konohana not want Tomonari waking her up in the morning anymore? Konohana looked down. He told her that back then she would often ask him to carry her, whether on his back or in his arms. She mumbled that she thought it was about time she graduated from stuff like that. Tomonari asked if there was some kind of reason behind that. Konohana said there was, but even she could not understand what it was. She did say that if he wants to do that then she would let him. Tomonari had to actively stop the memories coming to him. She told him that it was not like she wanted him to do that or anything. She asked Tomonari what it was and he told her it was nothing, just that if Hinako becomes completely independent he thought that his position as her caretaker might become pointless. Of course in reality Hinako gets lost even inside the mansion and tries to sleep whenever she gets the chance, so there is still plenty for him to take care of. He turned to see her with her arm out and took it she wanted to be picked up, so he gave in and carried her. A princess carry, for the first time in a while. Konohana looked into his eyes, still seeming sad. He asked her if she was alright, and she said that she was fine. She just needed taking to the dining hall. The truth was that she wanted him to continue taking care of her. In the future too. Tomonari reassured her that he was not looking to give up his role as her caretaker. She seemed to relax and squeezed his neck. When he put her down he realized that she seemed different compared to how she used to be. It felt like she was becoming aware of him as someone of the opposite sex. At the academy Tomonari saw Tenuji sitting by herself. Eventually she turned, to see Tomonari had taken a seat next to her. She apologized, telling him she was lost in thought for a moment. Tomonari asked her if she was not feeling well, and she told him she was alright. She said she was fine, she had just finished grading the tests. 398 points. It seemed that because he focused so much on the advanced questions his review of the fundamentals was a bit lacking. Next was table manners, but she thought he should take a short break first. Just as Tomonari thought, Tenuji seemed a bit unwell. He could hear her out if she was troubled by something, but it seemed like she did not want to talk about it. He saw her speaking with another girl. Was that Narika? Her eyes lit up when she saw Tomonari rushing over to him and asking him if it was okay for her to call him by his first name. Tomonari smiled and asked her what she had been up to. She told him that it was nothing special, she was just inquiring whether the new product they developed at home could be used. Their family made sporting goods and the academy was a valued client. She told him to feel free to compliment her. So he flatly told her it was amazing, and she scolded him teasingly, before asking if he was studying after school. Tomonari said yes, that he was staying behind with Tenuji. He explained that he was doing prep for the proficiency test and hands-on manners practice. She asked if he was still studying even after the exam, calling him diligent. But Tomonari and Narika's results were pretty similar, so it was a reality check for her to begin studying as well. Tomonari apologized for stopping her. telling her he would see her later, but before he could walk away she told him to wait, asking if this was the part where he would invite her to the study group. He said no, because she did not say anything. But she told him she thought he would get the hint. She asked if she was someone people hesitated to invite. She caught wind of such talk among her classmates recently. Tomonari told her that must have been tough. He said that study was over for today, but he still had to get his etiquette checked. He asked her if she would like to join him, since he did not see her as someone people would hesitate to invite. Narika smiled, telling Tomonari if it was him she was sure Tanuji-san would not mind it too. She cried that she knew the only ally she had was Itsuki. Eventually Tanuji returned, confused to see Miyakojima. Tomonari told her he would like to consult her about something. Narika asked if he really spent the night at Tanuji's place, and Tomonari told her it was something that just happened, but she said that was not something you can just brush off as it kind of happened. She told him she had been thinking of something for a long time, and that was how Tomonari managed to befriend so many influential people. He said that she was also an influential person. Tanuji said that since her father confirmed that his table manners reached a passing level when he stayed over, they would be wrapping up the manners lesson for now. Tomonari told her he understood. Perhaps thanks to dinner with Masatsugu-san at the Tanuji household, he felt like he had developed enough guts to brush aside a bit of tension. Narika sighed. Being invited like that made her jealous, and he seemed to have gotten everything figured out. Despite everything, she was a daughter of the Miyakojima household. Tanuji chuckled, telling them they both seemed too happy. But then Tomonari paused. He asked if something happened. He said that he owed her a lot, so if she was okay with him, he was always happy to hear her out. That made her eyes widen, so she accepted the offer and told him and Narika the truth, that a discussion about a potential marriage had come up. Tomonari and Narika looked at Tanuji in disbelief. She was having an arranged marriage. As a commoner, Tomonari was clueless about these matters, though he came to understand a bit through the Konohana household. Engagements can be good, not just bad. However, does this mean that Tanuji-san does not want to go through with it? She told him that was not what she meant. She was raised as a daughter of the Tanuji household, so she had been ready for marriage arrangements since childhood. It was just that it came rather suddenly, that she did not really know how to react. Narika told him it was the kind of problem people like them are destined to deal with. Tomonari asked if Narika had been approached about an arranged marriage too. She said she had not had one yet, but she knew it would come eventually. She pleaded with him not to misunderstand, that she was more inclined toward marrying for love. In any case, she would not accept an arranged marriage. Tanuji turned to Tomonari to ask him how he felt about her arranged marriage. Tomonari looked at Tanuji, who was patiently waiting for his answer. He said that in his family they never had discussions about arranged marriages, so he did not really understand. But if it is a good thing for Tanuji, then he wanted to be of as much help as possible. And he would cheer her on when the time comes. Tanuji smiled and thanked both of them. She said that thanks to them she felt more at ease. Thinking about it calmly, accepting an arranged marriage did not mean that her relationships would suddenly change. She may have been more tense about it than necessary. Tomonari told Tanuji he really liked her like this. So even if her arranged marriage ends up being decided, he hoped their relationship could continue. Narika agreed. When she was in the car, she thought to herself, what a dense person. If the arranged marriage goes through, they would not be able to spend their after-school time together like this. They might still meet during official activities, but once she was engaged, she could not casually meet other boys, so they could not see each other every day. But Tomonari was more indifferent than she expected. Even though he told her that working with her would be nice, did he want to stay by her side even after graduating? She held onto her chest and she realized this was unusual. She felt so uncertain she decided to devote herself to the Tanuji household, thinking that it was her ultimate happiness. But could her happiness be beyond this arranged marriage? Tomonari promised Tanuji he would rank in the top 50. With 2 weeks left until the proficiency exam, he continued studying and then started with the dance lessons. They would start by practicing the slow waltz. Tanuji said this was the fundamental posture known as the hold. They would move slowly while keeping this stance. She would guide with her feet and he could follow. She instructed him to half turn to the right. Tomonari noticed she was so close and she smelled nice. He could not help but sweat. She told him he was doing well and asked him to go again. In fact, Tomonari could dance even better than she expected. Even with her taking the lead, he could adjust surprisingly well. She asked if it could be that he had good athletic ability. Tomonari told her that moving his body was his strong suit, and maybe he was better at that than at manners or academics. Besides, he had heard that in ballroom the man was supposed to lead. Despite the dance being challenging, Tanuji did not let any emotion show and kept leading him tirelessly. An hour passed, and Tomonari sighed. The dancing really took a lot of physical strength. Tanuji told him it was usually done with regular rest, and Tomonari understood why. The muscles he rarely used were crying out, so they decided to start again, and Tomonari was still flustered. Why could he not get used to this? Tanuji began to notice him looking away, and she told him to look at her. She told him in dance not just body movements were important, but your gaze and facial expressions mattered too. so she pulled his face towards her and told him to look at her properly. Eventually Tomonari told her that he found this very difficult to mention, but it was her clothes. She asked what he meant, and Tomonari told her that her sweat was making the shirt see-through. Tanuji gasped and asked him where he was looking, but he reminded her how she told him to look at her. She apologized as she blushed. Eventually the session ended, and Tomonari thanked her for today, and he apologized for having her borrow the entire gym for them. Tanuji told him it was nothing. The second gym was often used by the students, but she told him if her clothes become see-through in the future he should let her know, as it would be embarrassing to notice it later. Tomonari told her he would prefer if she noticed it herself as much as possible. If he was the one to tell her, he would end up seeing it himself. Tanuji said that was not a problem. She believed that Tomonari was not that kind of person after all. She told him she was going to return the gym key. Tomonari asked Tanuji if ballroom dancing happened pretty often for someone with such a distinguished background as her. She told him that it varies from person to person. Since formal dances take a great deal of preparation, invitees are usually asked in advance whether they will participate, and those bad at social dances often refuse. So people basically get divided into those who enjoy social dances and those who do not. They continued to dance, and Tanuji told him he was really getting the hang of it now, and they would stop for today once they had danced 10 more pieces. She thanked him for his hard work. Tomonari almost never gets invited to formal dances, but he hoped that by the next chance he would be confident enough to dance in front of people. They did not really have the luxury of taking things slowly. Tanuji said that once her engagement is settled, they would not be able to stay together after school anymore. That was news to Tomonari, but she said it was only natural. If she had someone she had promised her future to, then she should focus on that person. Tomonari told her that would make him pretty lonely. After reflecting on it, he had realized that spending time doing things with her was enjoyable. And losing moments like these genuinely feels lonely. Tanuji suddenly blushed, and Tomonari asked her what was wrong. She said that it was nothing, before waving him off. Tomonari smiled, telling her he would see her tomorrow. Deep down, Tanuji was pleased. That it was not just her who enjoyed spending time with Tomonari. She wondered how she could make these days last. If her engagement gets settled, her opportunities to meet Tomonari will decrease. If she could simply invite him as a guest of the Tanuji household, they could have tea together, study and practice dance. But then she wondered what she was talking about. It might be fine from her perspective, but the Tanuji household had no reason to accept him merely as a student guest. Her mother asked if something was wrong, and Tanuji said she was the one who was supposed to be asking. She had seen her groaning in the hallway and wondered if something was wrong. She had usually been looking cheerful recently. Ever since she started spending time with Tomonari after school, she looked cheerful every day. So her mother asked if she could tell her what type of person Tomonari was. Tanuji looked down. She stayed silent. Why was she so concerned about Tomonari? He was someone who influenced her daughter, so her mother naturally was curious. So Tanuji said Tomonari was a very dedicated person. At first he seemed somewhat weak. He gave the impression of lacking confidence, but he had a strong desire to improve. However, what overturned that impression was the tea party and study sessions from a month ago, along with the sincere effort he has demonstrated recently after school. At first his table manners were rather superficial, but now he has completely adapted. Naturally, her instruction helped, but his serious attitude toward learning made him grasp it quickly. Honestly, she never imagined he would pick it up so quickly. He probably did not just study during after-school sessions but continued to study at home. She wondered if he was still practicing dance steps at home right now. Her mother smiled, just at the thought of how someone brought this much joy. She told Tanuji she had made a wonderful friend, and Tanuji smiled. She told her mother that observing Tomonari was very stimulating. If possible, she wanted to be with him going forward. But then she realized what she was asking. So she quickly added it would be very fortunate if the person who was going to be her fiancé was like that as well. Her mother smiled, telling Tanuji that she did not have to strain herself. She had a bit of a habit of taking on too many burdens, but really she deserved freedom. She told her mother to rest assured she was loving as freely as she wished. She thought of everything she needed to think of when it came to the arranged marriage. As a daughter of the Tanuji household, she must not acknowledge these feelings. Even so, if she were permitted to speak about just one grievance, she wished someone had told her about the arranged marriage before she met him. At first she displayed a somewhat weak and vulnerable side of herself due to this intimacy. She felt Tomonari improve his dance, taking the lead. He had improved beyond recognition. Tomonari had been practicing by himself and it was paying off. Tanuji told him they would end here for today, and Tomonari asked if it was earlier than usual. Tanuji told him she wished they could carry on, but she had things she needed to take care of today. This concerned the arranged marriage they discussed before. Today she would be meeting the other party in person. Tomonari looked at Tanuji before asking her if she had any thoughts about this arranged marriage. She asked him what made him think that. It was awkward to say, but he felt like she did not seem very enthusiastic about it. Previously, he remembered how she had expressed being conflicted about the engagement, but perhaps there was more to it than that. Tanuji told Tomonari not to worry himself. She was looking at this engagement with a positive mindset. On top of that, given her standing, she was obliged to go along with the arranged marriage. Since the chance presents itself, she would make sure to inform him about it. She announced that she was an adopted child.